Hello and welcome to Six Pack. Today I'm gonna start a new series. What if Deku had a rival harem? Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Some patterns and things were frequently common in one Izuku Midoriya. Deku's retrospective thoughts. The sun rises every morning, the moon rises at night, and rain falls from clouds. Additionally, Katsuki Bakugo would wait at his home's front door. He ought to have realized her seriousness. They had a long history of friendship. Furthermore, it had been evident for a long time how serious she was about any commitments she made. She had never once let them down in all the years they had known one another. Why, then, did he believe that promise in particular would be different? Oi, Deku, get down here already. I refuse to be late for class. Kachan and Katsuki Bakugo, his only and best friend, and the girl who, when they first met as kids, had promised that she would marry him when they grew up. She had a very powerful quirk. And him? He had no peculiarities. However, that didn't lessen their sense of camaraderie. His unique status, if anything, had the exact opposite effect. Izuku Midoriya would not be bullied. Kachan was the most vocal supporter of the oddball boy. She was the first to rush to his house and assure him that everything would be all right after hearing from her mother about his friend's condition. She was uncertain about how they would, but she was determined to keep their friendship intact. She was honest and faithful. Some believed that her temper actually set faster than her own explosive quirk, even though it seemed almost familiar from how explosive it would be. As a result, Kachan would arrive at his home's front door every morning. They would wait for him to exit, and then they would travel together to the school. That had long been standard procedure. Today was no exception. Izuku, Katsuki is waiting for you in the door. With a warm smile, Inko Midoriya acknowledged that knowing Katsuki was always looking after her son had truly calmed her anxieties. There was no denying that the girl was explosive, but her protectiveness of her son was also a reflection of her explosive temper. The girl who had bragged that they were getting married was still in her memory. She hadn't let growing up stop her. She could still recall what she had said. Moreover, she can't help but smile and giggle whenever she thinks of them. Miss Midoriya, I have come to request the hand of your son. The girl was direct. She took action because she knew what she wanted. She and Izuku both adored All Might, which is likely one of the many reasons they were friends. Both wanted to be heroes, and although her son had no peculiarities, he had continued to put his best effort into his studies and the books he had written about heroes. Furthermore, neither of his friends had given up on helping him. She was aware of Katsuki's concern for Izuku. But she was more concerned about Izuku's future if he was unable to pursue his dreams. She was happy that Katsuki was Izuku's friend. I am going Kachan. They had to get to classes on time, so Izuku went down and bid his mother farewell. As they walked together, Izuku noticed Kachan holding her short hair in her typical style, reaching the end of her neck with spikes coming from all sides. She waved at him. She spoke in the friendly quiet of the road. You are still aiming for Ua, right? She made an effort to act casual, but Izuku could tell she was still concerned. I will make it Kachan. He smiled as he spoke, doing his best to reassure the girl, who only reassured him in return. Even though he needed to get used to it by now, he was surprised by the way she put her arm over his back, causing him to approach her while she was speaking. That's the attitude, Deku. Her voice was explosive as usual. In summary, Katsuki Bakugo was impulsive, explosive, and largely instinctive. You better make it through, and even if you fail, you can still try to aim for the support course, right? She knew she could pass any exam they put Izuku in as long as she used her quirk, and she had the ideal plan to get her into UA. She would be the first to notice her academic shortcomings. However, Izuku had no issues in the academic realm, so she reasoned that if things went wrong, he could use his intelligence and enroll in the support course. Thus, they would accompany each other to UA and it would allow her to continue seeing him on a daily basis. She would lie if she said she didn't like the idea of working with him because she had a promise to keep. Deku had drawn something long ago in one of his many notebooks. She recalled that one in particular because it mentioned both her peculiarity and his desire for them to work together. If she claimed she didn't want that, she would be lying. Izuku was frequently made fun of for not having any peculiarities, but she knew him better. She was aware of his capacity for perseverance and, in a charming manner, his capacity for foolish bravery when called upon. He lived to help whenever he could because it was the right thing to do, and he had a golden heart. If he could help, he couldn't and wouldn't let things go. Kachan. And how every time she approached too closely, he would begin to stammer. She was not entirely sure when it began. When they were younger, they had been able to talk without him stuttering. Well, given everything that made him her friend, she would be lying if she claimed she didn't like him. Come on, don't start stuttering now. I am sure things will change. Izuku was unaware of it at the time. However, Katsuki's words were more accurate than anyone could have guessed. A day can bring about a lot of things. That wasn't surprising at all in a world full of heroes and villains. The fact that two children were receiving reprimands from numerous heroes was unexpected. In actuality, Katsuki had been the victim and they were inquiring about her well-being, but Izuku was the one receiving the reprimand. When they were reprimanding him for his carelessness, she would glance at him, mentioning that things would have turned out badly if All Might hadn't arrived. However, she wanted to yell at the heroes that Izuku was the only one who dared to advance. Izuku had stepped forward to assist his friend while the others stood contemplating their next course of action. He had put himself in danger to save her. She'd have followed suit. She wasn't sure, though, if she could have hurried as quickly as Izuku to recklessly risk her life and interfere in someone else's business. A hero would have come to her aid, so he didn't have to put himself in danger. He had been the first, though. She was reminded of the reasons behind her decision to remain with Izuku by such moments. Those who made fun of her for sticking with the oddball child didn't matter to her. All that mattered to her was having a good friend. As he looked down at being reprimanded by the heroes, that was the reason she was walking with him. Cheer up, you know they didn't mean anything bad. Kachan made an effort to cheer up the friend she was thinking about constantly. He wasn't sad about not having a quirk or about getting reprimanded. It was that he was unable to inquire about the hero's peculiarities. It had impressed her. She didn't understand why he wasn't upset about not being able to get All Might to sign his autograph. She would normally have expected him to ask for one, but it wasn't the ideal time to do so. Both of them were taken aback by All Might's unexpected appearance. It was an odd day for Katsuki Bakugo. Even if Izuku had asked for it, his day couldn't have been more bizarre. It was strange, amazing to see his hero standing in front of him and to be told that he could be a hero. And strange. She was surprised that his best friend was present to witness everything. She did make a vow to keep quiet about it. Suddenly, the door to a dream had been opened. It was something, but only a little. It would now have to be earned. Come on. Keep running, Deku. The problem was that preparing his body for his hero's fabled quirk required more than just following All Might's plan. However, in order to ensure that he enrolled in the hero course, he also had to deal with his best friend, who was completely compromised. What happened with the idea of me in the support course? Katsuki would not let him stop running, reminding him with a little explosion behind him as he hurried, gasping for air. That was before. Now you got no reason to don't give it your best. Behind him, a tiny explosion compelled him to yell and release the energy he needed to continue running. Plus, didn't you say we were going to be a team? How can we be a team if we aren't heroes? Even if he wanted to slow down, Kachan wouldn't allow it. Come on, Deku. You are not stopping until we reach the beach. In actuality, he continued until he arrived at the beach. Both of them were able to see All Might's body without his muscles. He was grinning as he looked at them. Ah, to be younger. When Izuku tried to explain his relationship with Kachan, he instantly became a stuttering mess. As she gazed at the beach, said girl just maintained her poise. So, he just needs to clean this place up. All Might gave him a nod and went over the entire plan with him. Izuku thought it was impossible, but Kachan thought. You only need to keep doing it till it's done. Izuku then moved the thrash to the side while Katsuki Bakugo and All Might watched. All Might spoke during this viewing moment. So, how long you two been together? Katsuki's eyebrow went up. Although she wasn't prepared for the question, she didn't mind. Is nothing formal. Not yet though, his mom has yet to give me his hand in marriage. The humor in her statement made All Might smile, until he saw the profound choice in her eyes. You are serious? She gave a determined nod. Look at him. What's not to like? He turned to face the young man he had deemed deserving of succeeding him. He had not yet learned more about young Midoriya, but he thought he was an honest child. Thus far, though, he appeared to be just a straightforward young man with clear priorities. If anything, his greatest virtue was that he was a hero. Moving forward to assist. Instead of considering the repercussions, he concentrated on how he could assist. I guess I can see why you like him. He gave her a smile. She simply nodded while observing Izuku thrashing around. Just so you know, you might need to keep an eye on him. Deku tends to overwork himself when he has a set goal in place. Is as impressive as how much he can ramble about heroes. He nodded as the girl described the various customs that surrounded young Midoriya, and the more he heard the girl's story, the more he understood two facts. The girl's serious affection for young Midoriya was the most obvious, and Izuku Midoriya had the makings of a great hero. Because he was serious about being a hero, he continuously helped without understanding why. He grinned at this. Mostly because it was clear from the way the girl talked about him that she was sincere about wanting to help Midoriya. Which prompted a query. Why call him Deku? Doesn't Deku means a can't do? After giving a nod, Katsuki explained the origin of the moniker. It can also be seen the other way. In his case, Deku means he is capable of doing anything. She smiled gently at her friend, who was struggling to breathe but continued to push the metals and thrash around as instructed. She was certain that he would achieve the objective that All Might had instructed him to do. The way the girl looked at her friend caught his attention. He gave a nod. It was indeed lovely to be young and in love. Time would continue to advance and turn its gears. Come on. Rush it. Behind Izuku, explosions could be heard, but he was able to continue running without getting tired. In actuality, they were both anxiously rushing to the test. All Might had informed them that the quirk would require some time to adjust to Izuku's body. In the worst situation, the new inheritor of One for All would be a splatter on the ground as the power he now possessed tore through his entire body. Kacchan naively thought he could pull it off, but Deku was anxious. The worst-case scenario was that he broke every bone in his body, as though. Katsuki Bakugo was a multifaceted person, and one of them had a tendency to lose their temper easily. You had to go and get in the way of the zero-pointer, right? Izuku laughed uneasily while his friend took care of him. She was in danger. Kacchan, gazing at him, she let out a sigh. And you had to go and break your arms and legs to save her. How many points did that got you? What she knew to be a 0 was muttered by him in silence. Right, 0, Deku, you better get into UA, one way or another, or the least of your worries will be whether or not your quirk can rip you in pieces. Explosions erupted from her palm as she made threats. Izuku gave a tense nod. Nevertheless, he couldn't deny that having a friend like Kacchan made him happy. Someone who encouraged him and persisted in believing that he ought to give it his all. I will blow up everyone in UA if that means getting you inside. Additionally, it occasionally affected his nerves. There was one thing that was certain. If he was accepted into UA, he and Kacchan would remain friends, but she would undoubtedly be joking about blowing people up. Izuku Midoriya had a stressful day. The mail was here. In order for them to open their letters, he had to wait for Kacchan. They had committed to opening the acceptance letter simultaneously. She maintained that there was no possibility that she would fail the test, even though he had hinted that the letter might ultimately result in her termination. There is no way you will fail, neither will I fail. So when the mail arrives we will open both letters of acceptance. Don't you dare open your letter before I reach your home. And and that is a big if, you weren't accepted, I will blow up everyone to get you in. She had made it obvious that he shouldn't overdo it either. Recovery Girl had made it clear that he should allow himself to get as much sleep as possible, but to be fair, he was attempting to give his body as much rest as possible. Her peculiarity was undoubtedly helpful, but occasionally it was better to let the body heal itself and build resistance. He was therefore awaiting Kacchan's arrival. When it came to doing something with him, she had always been on time. He therefore didn't think he would have to wait long. After the typical noise from below, he knew she would be hurrying to his room when he heard someone knocking downstairs. He heard the friend's loud voice, who had been asking the same question since they were kids, and a smile came to his face. Hello, future mother-in-law. I came to open my letter with Izuku. While we are at it, have you thought about it? Izuku could hear his mom letting out a sigh. I think you are still too young, Katsuki. Why not wait a few more years? He could hear the alarm in Kacchan's voice, but someone could steal Deku away. His mother's faint laughter reached his ears. I am sure you can keep other girls away from Hima. Didn't you do the same before? Izuku would not be approached by any girl. Not only did they not want to interact with the eccentric boy, but those girls who even dared to think about it would eventually run into Katsuki Bakugo, the unyielding defender. Boys were aware that they should avoid taunting Deku in her presence, or where they were audible to her. Unfortunately, when it came to Izuku, the girls' senses and instincts were pretty keen. Additionally, the girls were aware that they should avoid approaching Izuku. Katsuki was too tall to attempt to scale. I guess I could do that. I just wanted to avoid Izuku the trouble of turning girls down. He is not good at speaking with girls, you know it. Since he had only interacted with one girl, it was challenging to learn how to talk to them. And he didn't learn the customary social etiquette because that girl was so honest about her feelings. As his mother led her upstairs, he heard her laughing. Izuku waved at her while holding his letter as he watched her walk. As they walked into the room filled with All Might merchandising, she grinned. Bad news, Izuku. Your mom still won't let me have your hand in marriage. Don't worry though, I am sure she will let you go one day. Maybe when we finish UA and she sees what great heroes we are, she will me have your hand. Izuku gave the direct girl a nervous laugh. Both of them opened their letters in silent agreement. They noticed what appeared to be a holographic projector inside. She put hers on the floor before he could say anything about it. The sight of All Might startled them both. Congratulations, young Bakugo. Your combat skills have more than impressed everyone. You will need some helps on your grades. But worry not, we will help you with a tutor. And what do you mean it has to be a short message? Oh, whatever. Congratulations. You are in. In a way we are both in. For this year I will enter the lines of many teachers. And what do you mean cut? See you soon, kid. Izuku and Katsuki both grinned at All Might's demeanor. The man had shown himself to be more than one heroic figure. He discovered that the man could be straightforward and kind-hearted while training Izuku and conversing with Katsuki. A kid at heart, in a sense. Izuku's eyes shifted to his projector. All might be in the little disc, apologizing to him for being unable to make it, or worse, All might not be in it. He heard a tiny explosion before thoughts could darken his mood and make him more afraid. Not powerful enough to cause harm, but enough to draw his attention with a sound. Don't think so much about it. Now, put that thing on the floor and let's see what All Might says. She offered a smile that was so typical of Hera, that frenzied grin she frequently displayed when confronted with a challenge. The grin that brought Kachan joy. He nodded and positioned the projector so that both of them could see All Might's back. Is it recording? Back? Oh sorry, young Midoriya. I am surprised. When Bakugo spoke of your academic prowess I was impressed, and seeing your work in the written exam I am even more impressed. So, I should mention, you might want to spend some time with her, tutoring her on subjects and a short message, right? As you know, you didn't got 1 point in combat. He was about to glance down at this point when he felt Kachan strike him in the shoulder. Don't. Keep looking. It appeared that All Might was grinning widely. But, we are a hero academy. What academy wouldn't reward points to someone who saved someone in the need of help? You see, there were rescue points. We didn't mention Thesa. Short message, right? They both chuckled at the apparent pressure All Might was under. The point is, you got enough rescue points to enter, and even to place you in the number 1 rank. Congratulations, young Midoriya. I am sure young Bakugo will be happy to share the news. Izuku could hear nothing more after those words. Tears of joy were streaming from his eyes. While those tears were streaming down his face, the girl beside him was shouting triumphantly. They had both arrived. They both joined UA. They always hoped that both would become heroes. This calls for celebration. I must tell mother-in-law. She hurried downstairs to tell Izuku's mother the news, practically leaping away in long steps. She began to cry, and the woman's response was identical to his son's. Throughout, Katsuki Bakugo continued to yell in triumph. Additionally, it might not have been visible to anyone. She shed a few happy tears from the corner of her eyes, so tiny that they were hidden. Deku had arrived. She was pleased by that. Day 1. For the most part, everyone enjoys their first day of school. Izuku was experiencing conflicting emotions from his first day at UA. He had a real dream. In addition to attending the top academy, he would be able to see All Might. Find new friends who won't be critical of him. He hoped, anyway, that he wouldn't mess up. However, he was already off to a bad start. He wanted to ask the man he was following about a peculiarity that made him seem like metal, but he got lost in the hallways. He ended up having an argument with a girl during this time of confusion. Izuku was drawn to the girl's long, silky hair, but not because of the burn mark on her face. Oh no, it was the coolness of her hair that attracted his attention. It was red and white, divided in half perfectly. He pondered whether her peculiarity was the reason why the left side was a vivid red and the right was as white as snow. Izuku's astonishment vanished as he got up and extended his hand to the girl. Sorry, I did not mean to crash with you. Are you okay? The boy's lack of surprise at her burn mark caused the girl's eyes to open in surprise. The burnt mark on her clear skin had become a familiar sight to her. It actually succeeded in coming out. She detested it, but she detested it even more when others gazed at it with disdain or despair. They had no knowledge of her. She would even venture to say that the way this boy was staring at her now was similar to the way her sister had looked at her when she took her to try on clothes. I wonder? Was the boy's gaze truly filled with wonder? The awe vanished and was replaced by shame. She nodded her head away from him. I am okay. Now, would you move? After giving her a nod, the boy stepped aside. I am sorry. He told her he was sorry. She just gave a nod and walked away. Why feel sorry for others? Why gaze in awe at her? She would lie if she claimed she wasn't intrigued by the boy who had such awe in his eyes, but she regrettably wasn't sure she wanted to ask all of the questions. After the girl had gotten what she wanted, Kachan took Izuku away. Really? Getting lost? Don't you dare tell me you saw an interesting quirk and followed Tama? Izuku's silence could have been interpreted as an admission of guilt. Well, you are lucky we are still on time, come on. As they hurried to the classroom, the girl joined him by the arm. Fortunately for them, the teacher had not yet arrived. We made it on time, no thanks to you, Deku. She might have appeared irate to someone viewing them from the outside. Thinking of Katsuki Bakugo wasn't difficult. But Izuku knew she wasn't upset. The only thing that worried her was that they would have arrived late on their first day. I am sorry, Kachana, but thank you for helping me. She gave him a smile, the same savage grin she always wore. She gave him a palm in the back after releasing his arm. You are welcome. No way I am going to let you get lost. A few pupils gave the pair a curious glance. A few approached them. They seemed to be smiled at by one girl in particular. It's you. From the exam. The brown-haired girl came quickly toward them and waved enthusiastically. A tall, glasses-wearing student was also walking up beside them without saying anything. This was noticed by Katsuki. A pincer assault. They were receiving information from both sides. She had to choose to deal with the greater threat because, despite her best efforts, she was unable to stop both. She looked directly at the girl from the exam and gave Izuku a slight shove in the direction of the man wearing glasses. Hands off. She gestured with her palm toward the girl who stopped at the command. She never stopped smiling. Kachan, right? You remember me, Ochako? We were together in the exam. You were with Deku when he saved me? She appeared thrilled to see them both. Furthermore, why wouldn't she be thrilled? She had been saved by both of them. She had been spared the zero-pointer by Deku. And Kachan arrived and blew the debris away from them as soon as it began to fall. Because of the way she disposed of the debris, which caused it to fall on other test-takers, she had not received any rescue points. The important thing was that both had saved Ochako. She was grateful to them and delighted to see the girl who had embraced Deku so protectively when he was on the ground. Ochako, yeah sure. Just don't touch Deku again and we will be okay. The way the girl had touched Deku was still fresh in her mind. She claimed that using her quirk had been required. She would watch over her. In the meantime, Izuku was introducing himself to the tall, spectacled student who went by Ida. So you can accelerate? Indeed, I can reach fast speeds, but I need to be careful to not overheat my own legs. Izuku nodded, mentally noting Ida's peculiarity. Both boys were talking amiably about heroes and eccentricities, so it was a fun comparison. Additionally, the girl was being told by Katsuki the ground rules for avoiding Izuku. You respect that and we won't be having any problems. Ochako smiled at her and nodded. So that means we are friends? She gazed at her with excitement. The attitude of the girl made Katsuki groan. It was clear that she would not receive a negative response. Sure. Just, no funny business with Deku. She let out a loud cry, and the girl enthusiastically nodded, expressing her happiness that they could become friends. Katsuki was moaning to himself. Perhaps sending the girl away with an explosion would have been the best course of action. Perhaps at a later date. Izuku grinned when he heard Kachan, not because she had declared she would avoid him. Then again, she had a new friend. Kachan had no girlfriends to hang out with because she was always sticking with him. She didn't give a damn. Izuku, however, was concerned. He wished for her to have a large social circle. Additionally, he always felt a little bad about her having no friends besides him. Why would I want more friends? I already got you, and that's more than enough for me. She never lied. Izuku still wished for her to have more friends, though. Perhaps they would become close friends. That would be fantastic. Katsuki was thinking along the same lines. That perhaps Deku wouldn't stay with her if he made more friends. How foolish. He would still have her even if he made friends, and he would receive an explosion for his troubles if he even attempted to get rid of her. Their friendship was the strongest. No one or anything could take away her title. She looked around the classroom at the other students. Everybody was already in their little social circles. Everyone, with the exception of a girl who appeared to be observing her. She wasn't staring at her, though. She had her eyes on the person behind her. Not the tall, glasses-wearing guy. Ida. No, her gaze was fixed on Deku. She shifted to the side so she couldn't see Deku. A look of icy indifference greeted her. A look that conveyed her sense of superiority and her belief that she could easily get rid of them. She was eager to get that expression off her face. She would dismiss that expression and replace it with one of defeat-induced rage. The arrival of a man in a sleeping bag interrupted her thoughts. To be honest, Izuku had not anticipated a test of their peculiarities. It ought to have been fairly clear. The fact that Kachan enjoyed it was also not surprising to him. She never relied solely on her quirk. She always used it in more tangible ways. To pass the tests, he would need to put in his best effort. It goes without saying. What he really wanted was a test where he could use his quirk without having to worry about tearing himself to pieces. If he wanted to stay out of last place, he had to at least do exceptionally well in something. What could possibly go wrong? For a special combat class, the entire class was making their way to a mock building. They were all talking among themselves. Izuku and Katsuki were talking among themselves. However, it would be more appropriate to state that she was still upset about the eraser head. I swear I am getting eraser head. Katsuki was upset. Mainly because Deku had nearly been let down by eraser head. As OK Kachana, in the end no one was going to be expelled, and he is right. I need to learn to use my quirk. I can't go around breaking my arm every time. Katsuki gave a grunt. It made sense. She was unable to disagree. She didn't have to like it, though. Still, he could see another solution. One day he will be unable to see me, and then. A tiny explosion escaped from her hand. Wished to avoid creating a mess prior to class. Izuku gave a tense nod. I am sure that won't be needed, Kachana. She let out a grunt. You need to learn to be angry, Deku. Some people can only learn through bursting their thick skulls. The idea of fighting made her smile. They would be able to showcase their skills in a more combat-focused environment today. She may not have been a scholar, but she loved fighting. All Might produced what appeared to be cheat sheets as soon as they arrived at the area where they would be fighting. Katsuki and Izuku were taken aback. However, they also had the opportunity to get to know the man. Preparing a class was new to him because he wasn't a teacher. Well, everyone, today you will get in groups of 2. One side will be the villains and another one will be the heroes. The sheet he was reading was replaced. We will be following the battle that will take place in the building behind me with cameras so we can analyze how you fight and react in the setting. The fact that the building was to the left of All Might rather than behind him made Izuku and Katsuki feel a little bad. He must have been so focused on those cheat sheets that he lost his sense of direction. So, please come forward and get a numbered ball from the urn. You will pair up with whoever your number matches. All Might kept quiet and gazed up at the sky. He appeared to be a deeply ashamed and thoughtful man. As though pleading for forgiveness, he dismissed the cheat sheets and resumed his customary smile. But since this is our first combat class, you can choose your teammate for this activity. We will decide who plays villains and heroes through a coin toss. So get in pairs. Inside, All Might was yelling. The urn containing the numbered balls was something he had forgotten. In that instant, he promised himself something. He would prepare for classes with greater caution. It wasn't as simple as people claimed. The pupils began to form pairs by congregating among themselves. Katsuki wasted no time in bringing Izuku close to her. I am with Deku. All Might grinned at the two when he saw them. That's what he should have expected them to do. Specifically, that young Bakugo would seize the opportunity to spend time with young Midoriya. Indeed, youthful love was lovely. By the end, teams had been formed, and the roles of hero and villain had been determined by tossing a coin. The hero team had been Izuku and Katsuki. The Iida and Shoto team would be their opponent. As they used the allotted prep time to devise a strategy to either capture the villains or obtain the weapon inside the building they would be hiding in, Izuku spoke with Katsuki. Kachan, we don't know her quirk, we can't rush forward. Katsuki refused to budge when Izuku attempted to explain a plan to her. No, Deku, this is one of those times I told you about. We need to make clear through her thick skull that she can't look down on us. Izuku let out a sigh. He was aware that he would lose this debate. However, he was able to get her to pay attention. Okay, then you want to fight her? She smiled at the thought of the plan and nodded right away. We don't know what is her quirka, but I could act as a bait. He knew she didn't like the thought of him being bait, so he hurried his hand to her face. That way, when she tries to get me with her quirk, you will be able to know what she can do. She let out a moan. She didn't like the thought of him playing bait, but it was a good plan. Why do you even think that will work? His response caught her off guard. Because I trust you, Kachan. I know you won't let her hurt me. He spoke decisively. She couldn't resist saying no after seeing his decision-filled face. Rather, she put a hand on his back and drew him near to her. Look at you, Deku. Speaking like a true hero, he ultimately felt ashamed of the intimate encounter with the explosive girl. Kachan. She nodded and let go of him, laughing. We will go with your plan then. I will leave the smarts to you, and you leave the combat to me. He smiled at her and nodded. They had a strategy. The preparation period was over. The moment to act was coming. Izuku strolled through the corridors by himself. He moved steadily through the stairs to the higher floors. Katsuki was always hovering like a shadow near him. She was aware of how far she could blow him away with an explosion, regardless of the outcome. Both students were surprised. The girl with the red and white hair was eventually spotted sitting idly at the bottom of the stairs leading to the next floor. After giving Izuku a quick glance, she got to her feet. Only you came? Izuku assumed a fighting stance, but it was really one that prepared him to leap away. He waited for her to employ her peculiarity. I guess that makes it easier. She quickly dropped her hand to the ground. The hallway is completely covered in frosting. Like Izuku, Katsuki would have frozen her feet if she had been standing in the hallway. Izuku changed his mind. The ice had literally arrived quickly. With a quirk like that, it traveled the distance faster than he would have expected. However, it provided his response. Ice could be made by the girl. Additionally, manipulated based on how the ice arrived. Well, and now that you are unable to move, I only need to get your partner, the loud girl. She began to move toward Izuku. Observing his eyes as she approached, she was searching for disgust. Perhaps if she approached him more closely, he would respond honestly. He couldn't possibly have gazed at her in awe. With eyes like that, who would gaze at a monster? The dazzling explosion that erupted from the rear of the corridor interrupted her reflection. Hands off, cold hands. Her vision had been briefly impaired. A kick to her stomach was the next sensation she experienced. Following the explosion, Katsuki had hurled herself directly at her. A dazzling explosion. Great for distraction, bad for damage. She held Deku and launched herself back into the air by using the girl as leverage, dragging him away from the ice's thin coating. The girl had no idea that Izuku would receive assistance, no matter what she had planned. Hands off from Deku. After she had him come to her, he knew the rest of the plan after she gave him a nod. He started running, and a flying Katsuki met the girl before she could put her hand on the ground. She had used an explosion to propel herself forward, bridging the gap between them. Your opponent is me. Don't you dare look away from me. She got stuck in a block of ice before she could strike the girl. She had been stuck, however, the plan was completed. Izuku had gotten to his feet. It was also not going to be difficult to break free of the ice. The girl neglected to wrap ice around her hands. Near her, an explosion exploded through the ice. It was painful. She was, however, free and prepared to fight. Furthermore, prepared to engage in combat once more. What were you going to try with Deku? She made the girl look angry. None of your business. I will become the #1 hero, so I don't need to explain anything to anyone below me. She assumed a position that made it obvious she was going to fight. It was the explosive girl's loud laugh that caught her off guard. You? The #1 hero? Sorry there, cold hands, but the #1 spot is reserved, and the #2 with it, but you can keep the 3rd spot. As she prepared for a fight, she grinned. Before speaking, the girl gave her a chilly, uninterested look. Who is #1? She responded with a smile, preparing to blast the girl. Either me or Deku, so get ready for an explosion in your head. Katsuki Bakugo had a specific goal in mind. Removing the girl's expression of indifference. However, there was another goal. One is not entirely clear. She glanced at the stairs behind the girl she was fighting as she ducked under the ice that was attempting to grab her. She gave her a disinterested look. And she continued to make ice with just one hand. Her body appeared to be gradually showing symptoms of the ice that was encasing it. She could pass through and join Deku if she could use the ice to slow down. According to what Deku said, Iida had a speed quirk, if she recalled. Deku's quirk made him stronger rather than faster. However, if you couldn't get to a giant robot, it wasn't really useful to be able to destroy it. Surrender. You simply cannot hope to defeat me. More ice was thrown at her by the girl. She wouldn't be able to avoid it this time. She had no intention of avoiding it. One large explosion was thrown in front of her by her, noisy and ostentatious. The kind of explosion that, when it occurs, leaves everyone perplexed. One day, Deku had presented her with that notion. She would blow everything away with most of her explosions. However, she might be able to produce an alternative explosion. In return for losing power, one that is louder and has a larger area of effect. However, the ability to stun people near the explosion made up for the lost power. A stun grenade, and the girl with the icy hands would cease shooting ice as a result. She had no idea what had happened. She was aggressive at one point. The next time, she was confused. She was able to create ice all around her with a powerful scream, wishing to apprehend the girl who had confused her. She didn't hear back, though. No indication that she was apprehended. She became aware that she was encircled by ice when her vision returned. She had created a wall of ice in the stairs with her own peculiarity. But the girl was nowhere to be seen. She was no longer there. Most likely, she was past. It went without saying that she was furious about being played. Izuku and Iida stood motionless. Izuku was being prevented from moving forward by Iida. But in order to avoid Izuku's powerful quirk, he had to be cautious and not take any chances. He would most likely suffer injuries if Izuku caught him. He had witnessed the destruction of the zero-pointer. Naturally, Izuku wouldn't employ the same level of force. However, it was safer than sorry. 1 minute left. Izuku hurried forward at the sound of All Might's voice. Iida slid and moved quickly to trip him. The strategy was successful. Izuku, however, hoped Iida would just do that. He employed his quirk while he was falling. He felt energy flowing down his arm. He launched himself toward the fictitious weapon by pushing himself off the ground. His arm hurt as much as it could, but it didn't break. A minor triumph. Iida moved quickly to reach Deku. He was able to catch him and pin him to the wall with a leap and a sudden burst of speed. However, he had effectively prevented him from obtaining the fictitious weapon. Iida gave himself a smile. He had performed his duties effectively. Hero team wins. Thoughts of Iida separated. When he looked at the bomb, he saw Katsuki looking at Iida with a mixture of smugness and pride while touching the bomb with one hand. Well, we won, now. Mind letting Deku away from the wall? Izuku received an apology from Iida. The latter stated that since he was fulfilling his role, there was no need for concern. You are one great villain, Iida. He extended a hand to Iida. Iida accepted the handshake after smiling as she glanced at the hand. Izuku smiled as he tried to encourage the speedster. Typically, no one wants to be referred to as a great villain. However, Izuku's words conveyed the message to Iida. Please get out of the building in an orderly fashion, we will keep the matches going. All three gave a nod. Iida spoke after observing the number of heads. What happened with Todoroki? Izuku turned to face Katsuki at this point. Kachan? Where is she? The girl shrugged. Who knows, I made a stun grenade and left her alone. The objective was to win. Not to knock her out, you said it yourself, Deku. Follow the plan. She claimed to have embarrassed herself by drawing him near to her. Iida nodded in agreement upon seeing their partnership. An excellent demonstration of teamwork, as anticipated from two UA classmates. I thought you wanted to send an explosion to her head, Kachan. The girl nodded. Oh, and I did, Izuku. A stunning explosion to her face. You should have seen her, that smug face fading to become a face of despair at knowing she lost. Izuku had a general idea of what had happened, but she may be embellishing it. Meanwhile, Iida was intrigued. I thought your quirk was making explosions. She gave him a nod, and the idea made her smile broadly. I can make explosions, but there are many types of explosions. Deku one day thought maybe I could pull something like a stun grenade. Big, showy and loud. Of course it doesn't pack a punch like my usual explosions. But it opens up the chance for a big one. Izuku let out a sigh. I thought of that so she could stun people instead of hurting them. The girl chuckled at this. If they think they can mess with me and get away freely, they're wrong. The stun grenade's truth. Was it that Deku had come up with the plan for her? In order for her to have more than just explosions. He believed that giving her more choices would benefit her. He was surprised that she would consider it a gift. You spend all that time thinking on me. You didn't need to, but I am glad you think of me so much. He was going to assist her, however, it appeared to have only strengthened her desire to get married. When they eventually exited the building, they saw their group and the angry face of Todoroki staring at Katsuki. The latter merely gave her a smug smile. Want a rematch, Icicle? She said, glancing at the aforementioned girl, who appeared irate. Kachana, don't, you won, no need for bragging. Izuku then stepped forward and extended his hand to Todoroki. Good match, your quirk is amazing. Can you only do ice? Why is your hair of two colors? Is it related to your quirk? I am sorry if Kachan made you angry, she doesn't really mean it, she is really nice when you get the time to know her and she can be A tiny explosion interrupted him before he could continue to babble. Deku, rambling again, focus. He nodded his head in her direction, thanking her for it. My point is sorry if she made you angry, it was a good match. She glanced at the boy who was holding the hand. She gave it a little shake. The hand seemed strange to her. The temperature was warm. It was a different kind of warmth, not the one she received from her fire, one she'd be happy to hold near. The girl's expression as she refused to let go of his hand actually made Izuku uneasy. He was growing anxious. Katsuki was losing his temper. She moved forward and released Izuku's hand from Todoroki's. Enough cold hands, Deku is off limits. Looking angry, she said. After observing the entire situation, the other students in the class began to realize that perhaps Bakugo and Midoriya were closer than they initially believed. In a similar vein, Todoroki spoke. Says who? Are you his girlfriend? Her tone was one of icy indifference. However, there was a part of her that secretly hoped the girl would say no. She was shocked when the girl's eyes suddenly opened. Well, no, not yet. But Deku is mine. She managed to make everyone look at Deku with this slip of the tongue. One boy in particular was about to say something, but All Might interrupted him with a loud cough to get everyone's attention. Well, this was good. But, can we focus on class? The next team enter the building. As prep times go, we will review what went well and what went wrong. Everybody gave a nod. And paid attention. The conclusion of the analysis was that Bakugo and Midoriya's plan to remain close and support one another was sound. They were informed by All Might that being bait was not a good idea because it could be fatal to expose oneself to a more dangerous quirk. It was decided that they could have stopped both of them if Todoroki had remained with Iida to defend. As he continued to defend the fictitious weapon, Iida received praise. Bakugo received a little recognition. All Might told them that giving up the fight with Todoroki to support Izuku had been a wise decision. They would have lost if they had continued to fight on different fronts. The remaining matches proceeded smoothly, with some even producing amusing outcomes. Ochako won by floating away to the simulated weapon while her teammate diverted their attention with lighting. By the end, the aforementioned teammate was drooling a lot, which worried her. Later, she learned that if he released too much electricity, it was a side effect of his quirk. Through the cameras, they could hear Mineta talking about girls in a rather crude way, so Katsuki had threatened to kill him if he even dared to approach her. All Might grinned to himself at the end. Even though he had forgotten the urn, class had gone well and there had been no chaos. And no one would ridicule his inexperienced teaching error as long as no one ever found out. Ochako, Iida, Izuku, and Katsuki were talking as the day came to an end and everyone was heading home. Well, Ochako spoke for the most part. While Katsuki was pondering whether there would be issues by setting off an explosion to escape Ochako, Iida and Izuku nodded. She knew the girl had good intentions. However, she spoke just as much as Deku. Then she heard a voice calling out to her. It was so romantic how you told Todoroki to get away of Deku. She laughed off this. I was going to send her to die right then and there. No one can get Deku but me. As Iida pondered, she grinned proudly. So, are you two in a sort of compromise? Izuku was aware that the question would result in an unfavorable response. Of course we are. I am going to marry Deku. Getting Deku near her, she spoke with pride. The latter felt ashamed. Iida appeared taken aback, and Ochako was grinning. He asked. Aren't you two too young to get married? This made her groan. Not you two, is enough with mother-in-law saying that. Ochako and Iida both inquired about this at this point in order to get Izuku's response. She means my Moma. Both of the classmates mumbled a little, oh, in comprehension at this point. Meanwhile, Katsuki continued talking. I have been telling her to let me have Deku hand in marriage for a long time, but she doesn't budge. I don't know why, we are perfect for each other. Izuku's face had been growing redder and redder the entire time, and she never let go of him. Ochako just grinned. Kachan was clearly deeply in love with Deku. Even though she displayed it in a way that was all her own. They heard a voice on the announcement system as they arrived at the station and waited for their individual trains. We apologize, Mountain Lady had a fight with a giant villain and the lines got affected. Don't worry, they will be fixed in 1 hour. We apologize for any inconvenience this might cause, the train system will work again in 1 hour. We apologize for the inconveniences. Katsuki moaned at this. Mountain Lady, surely she was showing off again. Izuku let out a sigh. He was aware that Katsuki didn't particularly like Mount Lady, primarily because she believed she frequently fell short of her duties in her attempts to flaunt herself. I am sure that wasn't the case. Surely Kamui Woods is helping fix everything. Kamui Woods' status as a great hero was well known. His skill at containing damage was also well known. He was able to truly shine because of the versatility of his quirk. Iida let out a sigh. Well, we have 1 hour before the systems get working. Ochako did not find it bothersome. Rather, she viewed it as a chance to learn more about her friends. So Kachan, how did you and Deku meet? You make it sound like you two have been friends since, well, forever. She received conflicting responses to this. In response, Izuku crossed his arms and gestured. No, while Kachan nodded and grinned at the thought. She was pumped about two things. Fighting heroically, Deku, too. What a fantastic story. You see, I was just beginning to develop my quirk. In a park sandbox, a little girl with blonde hair was by herself. Her mother was sitting on a bench, sighing, and she was staring at her little girl, who was making explosions with her hands. No one was coming, so she couldn't hold them responsible. The other children shunned her. Perhaps it had been a mistake to take her to the park. Then a woman with straight green hair sat on the bench beside her. Is this location occupied? She laughed, the blonde woman. Go ahead, is free to anyone brave enough. The girl was alone when the other saw her. Oh, she resembles you exactly. After thanking her for the compliment, she noticed a young boy making his way to the sandbox. He saw the girl making explosions, and his face brightened as he hurried to her with tiny steps. His voice was one of wonder as he spoke. Is that your peculiarity? The girl's face was grim as she nodded at him after the children said they would flee. That's awesome. The green-haired boy caught the girl's attention. Can you repeat it? She was afraid she might have hurt the boy, but instead he heard him laughing, so she nodded right away and made another explosion, this one a little bigger and causing the sand to get over their heads. That is really awesome. You have a wonderful quirk. When they were done talking, the girl didn't look so depressed. They were talking about their names, where they lived, and who their favorite hero was. With joy on her face, the girl took the boy's hand at that precise moment, and the two kids approached the bench where their moms were seated to watch their children interact. The young girl brought the boy to her mother as though he were an offering or a child requesting permission to keep a dog. Mom, Izuku is my ideal spouse, can I wed him? The woman laughed, and the boy's mother also chuckled at the childlike behavior. Well, why don't you make Izuku a promise? She glanced at Izuku and nodded. Izuku, I swear to you that we will get married. The girl embraced the astonished boy. Their paths were connected from that point on, and they would never be parted under any circumstances. Or I'd give them an explosion. Anyone attempting to remove Deku will perish. The story took Ochako and Iida by surprise. As a child, Katsuki had been pleasant. The explosive girl was a walking bomb, letting her feelings and thoughts out carelessly. To be honest, they couldn't imagine her being innocent and even depressed given how foul-mouthed she was. It also demonstrated her ability to keep her word, as time had failed to sever them. That is stunning. So one day you two will tie the knot? She grinned broadly as she nodded. All I need is his mother's blessing. We can get married as soon as that is resolved. Iida was staring at Izuku, lost in thought. Do you have Katsuki's mother's approval? He nodded and sighed. She said that no one is crazy enough to marry Hera, so she would be extremely thankful if I marry Kachana. Katsuki's temper erupted once more upon hearing this. That sex worker. I'm doing fantastic. Anybody would want to wed me, which is unfortunate for them, as I had already selected Deku. She smiled as she finished speaking, drawing the boy closer to her once more. Ochako and Iida weren't sure if the smile was affectionate or not. It seemed like the smile of someone who was going to challenge someone to a fight. I won't abandon you for another man, so don't worry, Deku. Although he was ashamed of his intimacy with her, he had to acknowledge that he wouldn't trade his friend for anyone. So I take it that Todoroki worries you? She had Izuku's hand in a pretty tight grip. It wasn't a significant change with her, but Ochako's words turned her smile into a fighter's expression. That young lady. The nerve. Stay away from Izuku. That's the only rule to abide by. She should try something similar the next time. Ochako and Iida questioned how accustomed Izuku was to seeing the explosions because he didn't recoil when she detonated a tiny one. Most likely, the answer was a lot. Kachan, I am sure she is not like that. Looking at Izuku, Katsuki's eyes searched for something deep inside of him. Finding it, she pointed a finger at him and accused him. You found her attractive, don't you? Izuku's face turned red at this point. He was aware that he was a walking corpse. Is the hair not there? I knew I ought to have given mine more time. Isn't that the reason you like Mountain Lady? Ochako thought this scene was cute. Katsuki didn't seem to care about her appearance, but she seemed to value Deku's opinion. Iida wondered if Katsuki's mother was right, as only Deku seemed to be able to control the girl's temper and all of her attitudes. Kachan, it's not like that. You're attractive, too. Katsuki was a pretty girl, but things weren't so simple, and she pointed at him again, this time with a mixture of anger in her eyes. At this point, the girl stopped, and Izuku thought she had calmed down at being called pretty. You also said, you do think she's attractive, then. Iida and Ochako smiled at the two as Izuku attempted to soothe her, demonstrating their close friendship at possibly the best of all while an onlooker waiting for her own train ran a hand through her hair and asked herself a question. Was her hair attractive to him? Since they lived close to one another, Katsuki and Izuku were traveling home together on the same train, and they had written to their families to explain the delay. As they rode, Katsuki would glance at Izuku and run a hand through her hair. Izuku spoke after they got off the train. I don't mind your hair not being longer, it suits you, Kachan. The girl merely gave him a pat on the back and smiled. It definitely fits me, we're talking about me, and I fit in with everything. The girl refused to publicly acknowledge it, but those words meant as much to her as the fact that he had called her pretty in the train station. Yes, he had said that too, but little triumphs. Would the girl try to make a move on Deku? What could possibly go wrong? Like, when Todoroki arrived to join them at the table in the school cafeteria for lunch the following day, Katsuki was understandably a little irate. What are you doing? It was too early in the day to be so irate, so she spoke while controlling her anger. I'm seated. That seems obvious to me. Katsuki's head was starting to tick at this point, and Izuku was shocked that she hadn't exploded at the girl with the ice quirk's blatantly sarcastic tone. You understand exactly what I mean. Why do you sit next to Izuku? Respond to cold hands. Since Katsuki would always sit to the left of Izuku, she was upset when she noticed that Izuku was sitting in his typical spot to her right and that someone had disregarded the rule that one should keep one's hands off Deku. I like this spot, is not occupied either. Todoroki had moved to sit to Izuku's right, effectively trapping the inheritor of the All Might quirk between two unmoving girls. Please stop referring to me as cold hands. I can only make ice with my right side. I'm known by a name. Is Todoroki Yukiko? Whatever is more convenient for you, you can call me Todoroki or Yukiko. Katsuki's rage was rising as she was eating elegantly, but Izuku spoke before it could explode. What does your left side do? You mentioned that your right side makes ice. The girl tensely looked at the boy, whose eyes were full of wonder, and she couldn't help but answer him, even though she didn't like saying it or even acknowledging its existence. I can release fire from my left side. My quirk is called Fire and Ice. Izuku grinned and his eyes opened. That is amazing, you have so much power. Katsuki moaned as Izuku's eyes brightened, realizing that she would no longer be able to make the girl leave, not without Deku's insistence that she stay. He had discovered an intriguing quirk, and he was all about analyzing him, a remarkable talent that she admired. She detested the fact that this meant she would no longer be able to make the girl leave. This girl found her food more intriguing as she looked at it. Is not that Greta is a bad quirka? Izuku's eyes were startled at this, but then he appeared assured. Katsuki, who knew Deku, sighed. She had already anticipated what he would say. Is that your peculiarity? That's really awesome. But that's your peculiarity. Every peculiarity is fantastic. She knew he would say something like that, though perhaps not exactly the same words as for her quirk. Izuku had said those words quite obviously, and Yukiko could see it in his eyes. He claimed that her quirk was fantastic and that it was her own, not her father's. She didn't mind that she was smiling, even though it was a tiny smile and she wasn't used to it. Katsuki recognized those eyes quite well. They were the eyes she herself had when she thought of Deku, and she came up with a single word to describe the current state of affairs when she saw that smile. She then spoke the words aloud from her mind. No way. Inko Midoriya was a multifaceted person. In Izuku's humble view, she was a proud mother, a devoted wife, and the best cook. Katsuki, on the other hand, was not so modest and vowed that no one was better at cooking than her. However, she was also accustomed to having Katsuki visit her home and ask questions or share her opinions. Izuku had gone running at this point in the weekend, stating that he needed to continue exercising his body. A little later, Katsuki had shown up and asked if they could talk. She politely nodded to the girl, anticipating the customary inquiries about Izuku's hand. The girl's tirade about a classmate caught her off guard. And then she wouldn't stop looking at him. Katsuki was upset. She gripped the tea-filled cup she had given her firmly. Primarily because she was suppressing her urge to set things off by holding something in her hands. Inko had a strong rule that her house could not have any explosions. There is a limit to how many times a person can call the firefighters in a single week. She had the same eyes as me. Inko thought it was a strange excuse for anger. I am sorry, Katsuki, but I fear I don't see anything bad in the girl having the same eye color as you. He moaned at this point before continuing. She looks at Deku the same way I do. I saw it in her eyes. Inko couldn't help but laugh at this. Seeing Katsuki upset over something like that was very different. I don't see what the problem is. Isn't Izuku your boyfriend already? She made a playful remark and observed Katsuki's sudden shyness. I haven't asked him. It was difficult for Inko to hear, and even harder to believe. You have never asked him, but you want to marry him? Katsuki nodded in response. I thought that as we were best friends and there was no one else who wanted Deku that I could just jump straight to marrying him. Inko Midoriya occasionally forgot how adorable Katsuki could be. It was one of those times right now. Nevertheless, she had to tell the truth. I know, but the thing if Izuku and you are not a couple, this girlie you said her last name was Todoroki? She gave a nod. Todoroki has as much chance as you in that case. If she does ask Izuku to be her boyfriend, she has all the right to do so. I know is not what you wanted to hear, but the thing is you two are not a couple. She was kind in her speech. She was aware of Katsuki's fondness for her son. Lying, however, was useless. The girl needed the whole truth. She nodded, which surprised her. She was obviously upset. She already has the advantage of Deku thinking she is pretty. Damn her long hair. Inko's glance at Katsuki meant only one thing. Words. Sorry, but arg. She was struggling to keep from cursing and blowing up the teacup. But that wouldn't make her popular with Izuku's mother. Even less when requesting his hand in marriage. Don't worry about it, Katsuki. Maybe she is just thankful. You know Izuku has that effect on people. The girl gave a knowing smile. She knew that people like Iida and Ochako valued Deku, even though the others at her previous school might not have. And she was particularly concerned about that. She recognized a part of herself in Todoroki. Both women had the will and the determination to compete for the title of top hero. Their instincts for combat were clearly strong. She was aware that the stun explosion trick would not be successful, not as she had anticipated. Furthermore, despite her reluctance to admit it, Todoroki was attractive. She had an air of royalty about her, as though she believed she was superior to the others, and regrettably, she believed she possessed the skills needed to support her assertion. She simply didn't know enough about Yukiko Todoroki. Maybe you are right, maybe I am just seeing too much into Ida. Of course I am seeing way too much into it. It's not like she could get a crush on Deku just because he was kind to her. The thought made her laugh aloud. In the meantime, Inko Midoriya was only thinking that what Katsuki had described was exactly what had previously occurred. She hoped Katsuki wasn't like this Todoroki girl. If not, her son would be having serious issues. However, what were the odds that it would be that way? She was only grateful. Surely, it was a surprise phone call from her sister for Fuyumi Todoroki. Fuyumi. How do you know if you like someone? When Fuyumi's teacup fell to the ground, she muttered a curse. Fortunately, it was composed of plastic, which prevented it from breaking in the event of a fall. The surprise was still present. She had just been asked for advice by her younger sister. It's not that they were silent. Simply put, her sister was never called for such a thing. She frequently talked as though she was reporting on her brother and her home life and, well, endeavor. Admittedly, she found it difficult to address him as Dad. Fuyumi. She forced herself to stop thinking about those things and concentrate on the call. Sorry, Yuki. Mind repeating that? My phone reception was bad for a moment. The girl asked the same question again. How do you know if you like someone? If she hadn't left her teacup on the table beside her, she knew she would have dropped it once more. Oh, well, you want to spend more time with them. You wish to know all about them. You want them to spend time with you, not because they can get anything, but simply because you like having them close. Well, you want them always to be with you. She wasn't a romance expert. To be honest, she was still unmarried. She still knew a little bit about romance and had her high school crushes. All right. Aside from the standard advice she saw on TV, she knew nothing about romance, but she couldn't tell Yuki that. "I see how can I know if they like me back?" This made her swear. She knew very little, and she said it in a light-hearted way. "You can always ask them." On the other side, she could hear humming. "I see. Thanks Fuyumi. Have a good day." The phone call ended, and she heard the beep. "Yuki? Yuki? Yuki?" Under her breath, she swore. I hope she realized she was joking. Yukiko let out a sigh. By the end, she realized her sister was joking. She most likely didn't know how to ask such a question. Nevertheless, she was grateful for the assistance. Deku was liked by her. She wasn't looking, but not in the romantic sense of the movies her brother watched. No, things were different. Deku gave her the impression that she might actually have a friend. Someone who wasn't a candidate for an arranged marriage and wasn't coerced by her father. Someone who showed her kindness without expecting anything in return because he thought her peculiarity was cool. That's all. However, the watchdog surrounding him would not allow her to approach. Kachan. Katsuki appeared to be her name. Deku, however, dubbed her Kachan, indicating that the two were close. And based on her knowledge, she was the watchdog that made sure everything that was instructed to be kept safe was never compromised. Unfortunately, that meant it would be difficult to talk to him. Or rather, it might be. After all, their teacher, Aizawa, had been clear that they would soon be taking a class on rescue. They might get an opportunity to talk. How difficult could a pleasant conversation be? They would undoubtedly be able to talk briefly and attempt to develop a friendship. It's not like something negative could occur, is it? It would be a controlled stage in UA, after all. The only universe appeared to occasionally work against the opportunity to speak with Izuku. In the end, Katsuki and Yukiko met up in the rescue area's landslide section. They got rid of all of them with little to no difficulty. They were all trapped by Yukiko's freezing wave and Katsuki's loud explosion. She had explicitly warned the frozen villains that if they didn't start talking, she would use her quirk to cause them to become hypothermic. The icy expression on her face while she spoke impressed Katsuki. She questioned whether this was the same girl who had been observing Izuku with kindness. They soon started talking, and chaos ensued. Undoubtedly, it was more difficult to believe that nobody knew. The fact that villains had attacked them, or that All Might and the teachers who arrived when Iida was able to run and call for them were the reason they survived without suffering a loss. Something had been different. Todoroki was aware that fighting villains was expected of her. She had felt confident and didn't anticipate finding herself in this situation. Her left side was completely unnecessary. She was able to beat everyone with her ice thanks to her quirk. Evidence that she didn't require his peculiarity. The sheer number of thugs they had captured shocked Katsuki, who also observed that they didn't appear to be equipped to fight them and that they didn't appear to have any combat-ready quirks. Like they were just a diversion. Perhaps they were. It was different to watch All Might battle so closely. As she considered it, a smile appeared on her face. Izuku would eventually be able to fight just as well as All Might, and no, that was incorrect. He would use the strength of All Might to fight in his own way. She was able to smile at the thought. It goes without saying, there was plenty of free time for Katsuki. Nedzu, the headmaster, had given the students a week off to unwind after the battle in the rescue zone. In order to check on Izuku's recuperation, Katsuki wanted to go see him. He appeared to have slightly injured himself. He was hurt, but it wasn't as bad as the 0-pointer. Additionally, she would have typically visited Izuku. However, the girls in the class wanted to go out together, so she wasn't with him. Take some time to simply browse shops and watch a film. She wasn't interested, to be honest. Her mother insisted she make friends, even though she would have preferred to spend the time training and hanging out with Izuku. Additionally, her mother graciously called Ochako to offer to go out with them before she could respond. Ochako was content. Unfortunately, she didn't feel the need to leave her. She would deny it if they asked. Whoever expressed her opinions would ultimately be killed by her. However, she felt that Ochako was a decent friend. Thus, she spent her first day of leisure in the mall, with Ochako, and with Todoroki, who wasn't exactly the best company. She found Ochako impressive. The girl just seemed to have no trouble making friends, and because she was able to get along with everyone, she invited Todoroki to join them. Her classmates were all right. While Yaozorozu was intriguing and clearly seemed different in a way she wasn't sure of, Mina Ishido, the pink girl with horns, was similar to Ochako. There was nothing she objected to. Something simply had to be there. When Tsuyu spoke, he was straightforward. She could work with that, and she liked it. She had to admit that she was having fun just going about her day, window shopping, and strolling around. And it was driving her crazy. She liked spending time with Izuku more. They would go grab a bite to eat, stop by a few shops that sold manga and figurines of All Might, and talk about anything they could think of. However, she anticipated that this would be different. They weren't Izuku. If her discomfort was any indication, she felt a sadistic sense of fulfillment when she realized that Todoroki was going through the same struggles as her. The voice of Ochako interrupted her thoughts. "Todoroki, I just noticed, you dress similar to Kachan." A few ideas came to Katsuki in a hurry. She had to tell Ochako first that she couldn't go around calling her Kachan because that was how only Izuku and occasionally her mother called her. The second one, too. Was that accurate? Ochako's assertion was accurate. Because they were more comfortable than dresses and skirts, which her mother wanted her to try, she frequently wore pants and t-shirts. Actually, she can't recall a single picture of herself without pants. She found them more comfortable than skirts. It appeared that Todoroki felt the same way. She had on a long-sleeved shirt and pants. It wasn't considered feminine. However, it appeared that she agreed with her. She addressed Ochako. "I simply prefer dressing like Thesa dresses aren't my thing." They weren't, either. Because Kamui Woods and Mountain Lady were a couple for mediating purposes, her father was always saying that she should have someone to gain more popularity. She didn't agree, and if that were the case, it was disheartening to think that other heroes behaved in a similar manner to her father in an attempt to gain greater notoriety. She detested the dresses, though, since they were intended for her to use in an attempt to meet a hero her father approved of. She refused to allow herself to become involved in such a marriage. Unconsciously, she touched her facial scar. "I just don't like Tama, they're not my thinga." The girls gave a nod. However, it was clear that the tone had changed. However, Katsuki had not been compelled to leave her house and spend time with Izuku in order to find herself in this predicament. "What are we all waiting for? I came here to eat, so let's go get something." Everyone nodded and followed her as her boisterous demeanor lifted the somber atmosphere. Ochako approached her and spoke to her in a rapid whisper. "That was really nice of you, Kachan." The girl merely snorted and continued to move forward. "I don't know what you mean, I am hungry, and that's all. So don't leave me waiting, all of you." Ochako couldn't help but smile. Katsuki didn't seem to be the kind to acknowledge her kindness. If anything, her small gesture of removing Todoroki from the conversation demonstrated her kindness. Beneath the cacophony and foul-mouthed demeanor, there was a sweet girl. After merely eating hamburgers, they claimed to be going to see a movie, but Katsuki deceived them by claiming to have already seen it. She truly wanted to go to the bookstore and buy a manga for Izuku, not because she didn't want to spend time with them. If she was lucky, she might even get one for herself. The Fist of the North Star is something you can't get enough of. There were moments when she wished her peculiarity could set off such explosions. Well, she might set things off. Not the same kind, though. Little triumphs, she surmised. She was shocked to discover that Todoroki was pursuing her in the shopping center. Since the mall's exit was close to the bookstore, she assumed it was just a matter of walking in the same direction. She knew Todoroki wasn't just following her when she walked in and saw her behind her. She continued to peruse the manga section despite this. Only to find Todoroki looking at her now. She'd had enough. She wasn't particularly patient in the first place. "What do you want?" The girl, who was staring at her with a blank expression, was threatened. No intimidation, no fear, basic indifference. "Do you have Midoriya address?" Her temper flared at the question. What's that to you?" Todoroki just held off on asking. "Do you?" Katsuki moaned at this and then responded. "I do, but I am not telling you." At this point, the bookstore owner came up to her and told her to be quiet. Though she remembered that would get her kicked out, she wanted to tell him to go die. She nodded so ashamedly. "Could you give me his address?" Katsuki remained composed, driven by the desire to purchase a manga for herself and one for Izuku. "No, I am not." She picked up the manga she was reading, but Todoroki moved in front of her before she could leave. "If you don't help me, I will tell Ochako you ditched them. I know you didn't see the movie." Katsuki crossed her arms after giving her a furious look, preventing herself from blowing up, literally. "How do you know that I lied?" Todoroki grinned. A smile that conveyed her sense of pride in it. "I didn't, I do now." Izuku frequently used that tactic to surprise Katsuki whenever they were conversing, and she wanted to blast her off. She never lied, and he always knew it. Furthermore, even though Ochako might not feel guilty about it, she didn't want to think of her face losing its typical smile when she realized she had abandoned her and the other girls. Katsuki held out her hand to Todoroki. "You better not tell Ochako." If I learnt that she knows, I am not joking, you are going to die. Todoroki realized how serious she was because she hadn't yelled those words. She gave a nod. She gestured for her to come along. After purchasing the manga, she departed. Todoroki just asked as they strolled together, "You are not going to tell me where he lives?" Now that he was not forced to remain silent in the bookstore, Katsuki responded loudly as ever. As if, "I don't trust you alone with Deku. I am taking you there to fulfill my part of this deal. But I am not letting you alone with him, so get ready, Icicle. I will be your chaperone for the day." Katsuki was unconcerned. She would visit Midoriya with Todoroki. Her mother-in-law would then give Todoroki a look and refuse her entry into her soon-to-be husband's house. She refused to let an enemy into her house. That is precisely why, when Inko Midoriya opened the door for both girls and offered them a drink and a piece of cake she had purchased for Deku, she was only able to scream one thing in her head. "Mom-in-law, how could you have done this, traitor?" When Inko realized why the girl was staring at her, she bowed sheepishly to Katsuki. As Inko sat there, she adopted the expression of the girl before her. She saw a scar on what she believed to be a lovely face, along with red and white hair. She gave her a smile. "So you are a friend of Izuku?" The girl appeared astonished by the generosity being shown to her. "I hope Toa he is nice." Inko was taken aback by the wall she was seeing. Todoroki was clearly not a people person. She assumed it was related to her scar. She continued to smile at her. "Izuku is a nice boy for sure. Did you know Katsuki wants to marry him?" In an attempt to make her laugh, she said it. Rather, Todoroki greeted her with the same grave expression. Nevertheless, she received a response from Katsuki, who appeared pleased with herself. "Indeed, I am going to marry him, so hands away of Izuku." The boy had just returned from his workout and was looking at the loud declaration with a mixture of embarrassment and exhaustion. Hello Kachan. More than the embarrassment, the exercise was the cause of his stutter. By this point, he was practically accustomed to hearing the marriage proclamation. Since there was no easy way to get used to it, it was practically the keyword. He became aware of a third presence in his house at that point. There was Todoroki. "Ah, Todoroki. What are you doing here?" He feared that his mother had stepped in to stop her from getting revenge on Kachan. Rather, he was taken aback by what he heard. "I came to check on you. I thought you were hurt by the incident." Izuku nodded in gratitude but blinked at this. "I am actually well. Thanks for checking, Todoroki. I honestly didn't know you and Kachan were friends." Izuku's eyes closed in a mixture of joy and pain, and he smiled as he spoke. The workout had been beneficial, but it also revealed how exhausted he was from their earlier encounter. Even so, he smiled naturally when he realized Katsuki was becoming friends. "Izuku, you should take a bath." His mother's words snapped him out of his reverie, and he nodded and excused himself to go take a bath. Inko Midoriya was forced to get up at this point and remain at the front of the stairs. Yukiko Todoroki was baffled as to why she felt the need to leave her home. Until Bakugo's moan reached her ears. "Come on. What is so wrong in me taking a bath with him?" Inko gave her a smile, but it was clear that she would not give in. "Sorry Katsuki, but I insist that boys and girls can't share a bath together, even less two teenagers." Inko gestured to the kitchen before she could say anything. "Why not take another slice of cake? Is too much for me and Izuku, but with 4 people here the cake will be well shared." Katsuki wanted to moan, but she just walked in the direction of the kitchen. With a short fuse, Todoroki found herself trailing the girl. "She talked in the kitchen. She is nice." Katsuki just gave her a glare at this. "Don't get used to it. Mother-in-law is under my protection, just like Deku. So hands off from them." She was telling the truth, and Todoroki knew it. Consequently, she followed suit. "I only plan to make friends with Izuku. Nothing more, nothing less. I don't plan to go around playing house like you. I will be the #1 hero." The girl merely kept a smug smile on her face as she left the kitchen with 2 plates of cake, even though the comment was meant to enrage Bakugo. "1 each for Izuku and her. And yet, I managed to beat you, even though in your words I am just playing house. Doesn't that mean you are simply not good enough?" She walked out of the kitchen. Todoroki's suspicion that Inko Midoriya wouldn't like her house turning into an ice field was the only reason she didn't turn the entire area into an ice field. She was even less convinced that Izuku would want to be friends with someone who had just shown up at his house and caused chaos. She would just need to wait for an opportunity to encase herself in ice and battle Katsuki Bakugo. The opportunity would undoubtedly arise. It would be an understatement to say that Izuku wasn't accustomed to Katsuki's presence. He was so familiar with her that he could almost have a sixth sense of danger, alerting him to her impending attack. That being said, it was impossible for him to flee from her. He had made one attempt. He believed that going to the city's marketplace had been a wise move. He was shocked to see a laid-back Kachan offering him an ice cream cone. Finally, I was worried this would melt before you got here. I got your favorite. He was only reminded by that experience of how impossible it was to escape her. And yet here he was, attempting to flee her once more. Within his own chamber. Thinking that he might be able to jump out of the window, he barely made it around the bed in his own tiny room. The window would enrage his mother. But damn the consequences. Come on, is nothing so big, I just want you to come with me to buy clothes. It was their third day off, and the rest period was still in effect. The first one with the girls and the second one training alone had already been lost. That's why she wanted to hang out with Deku. Come on Deku. Before he could reach for the window, she sprang through the bed and tackled him. She knew he would attempt to jump through the window, so she stopped him in his tracks during the tackling and got him in her arms, which was always a good thing. Kachan. The situation they found themselves in caused Izuku's face to flush. With no space between them, it was a pretty close embrace. The only reason for the short distance was that her chest was in contact with his arm. No, I want to spend time with you, you already rested enough. In actuality, he didn't mind hanging out with her. He was aware, though, that purchasing clothing for Kachan would ultimately result in her calling the entire transaction a date. She would also most likely try to make fun of him like she used to. He was only able to withstand mild taunting. A whole day of teasing wasn't necessary for him. But she had already caught him. Thus, there is no escape. He was forced to concede defeat as a result. A-okay, but no teasing a C, could you let me go? As she spoke softly, Kachan smiled and allowed herself to lean closer to him. No, Izuku closed his eyes and sighed. He still grinned. It was always pleasant to sense her concern for him. Kachana, why you were a great frienda. He was embarrassed and grinned. Despite her smile, the girl with the iron grip around him had a sad expression in her eyes. It was nice to be friends. She hoped for the title of girlfriend, though, because she wanted something a little more self-centered. Todoroki's day wasn't going well. The first was her alleged father. Endeavor had informed her that a suitable candidate for a marriage proposal would be found for her shortly. It would be ideal for her, he said. She could get more attention from a strong boy who would undoubtedly assist her and make them both appear fantastic to the media. The worst part was that her favorite shirt had a hole in it that was too large for her to attempt to repair herself. And one that would be difficult for even Fuyumi to fix. A tiny portion of the fabric appeared to have been retained by the washing machine, and the rest of the fabric was washed, making the hole bigger. She needed to find a new shirt now. Getting her a shirt she liked would be difficult. Boys' shirts appealed to her. The freedom of movement and the message that she wasn't a doll for her parents to try to marry off appealed to her. She was strolling through the shopping mall, observing tiny shops. I was hoping to find one that matched her style. It would look good if it was red and white. Something black, perhaps. She found a shirt she really liked when she walked into a small store with many different designs. 3 sets of wings on a skull. It had metal accents, which gave it a really hip and fashionable appearance. She felt resistance when she tried to grab the shirt. She was on the verge of apologizing to the other individual attempting to seize the shirt. There might be another one for her. However, she put up more of a fight after realizing who was attempting to take the shirt. Cold Hansa should have guessed my day was going too good. Kachana. The fact that she referred to her by the nickname that Izuku and Ochako used infuriated Katsuki. Look, after examining the shirt with a sigh, Katsuki let it go. Have it. You are not ruining my date. I am not letting it go bad by a shirt. The fact that the explosive girl gave in surprised her. The fact that the girl appeared to be out on a date surprised me even more. How could anyone possibly risk asking the explosive girl out? Kachan? Did you got the shirt you were looking for? Oh. Then she caught sight of him. Midoriya Izuku. The boy was dressed casually, wearing a white shirt and blue pants. Thus, he was the girl who was exploding. She saw the way he glanced at her and gave her a somewhat uneasy wave. Ah, hello Todoroki. You are also buying clothes? Purchasing clothing? She claimed to be on a date, didn't she? She addressed Katsuki with her usual bluntness and coldness. I thought you were in a date. She appeared irate at this point, and Izuku sighed. They are both talking simultaneously. I am in a date. We came looking for clothes. When Katsuki turned to face Izuku, he simply shrugged. She had no choice but to talk again. I came to get some shirts. Deku is coming with me because I wanted to spend time with Hima, so why are you here? Todoroki gazed at Izuku, her face remaining icy and uninterested, apparently addressing him rather than Katsuki. I came to get a new shirt, my favorite shirt got ripped. Izuku gave an embarrassed nod. Speaking to girls was still something he was getting used to. Furthermore, he was always embarrassed by the aura that Yukiko Todoroki possessed. He wished he didn't think it was because he thought Kachan was attractive, too. With a groan, Katsuki went to fetch Izuku. Let's go, Deku. We can find another store. Izuku nodded and waved to Todoroki, observing that she appeared to be approaching them while carrying the previous shirt. Katsuki also observed this. Why are you following us, cold hands? She chose not to display the nickname if it bothered her. She continued to walk. I am paying for the shirt. The cashier is near the exit. Also, I was hoping to invite Izuku to get an ice cream. After all, you two are not on a date. There were two effects of the phrase. The first to embarrass Izuku. The second one to enrage Katsuki. However, she felt him grasp her hand before she could speak. Deku? He gave Katsuki a smile before turning to face Todoroki. We could use an ice cream. We are all partners, right? Todoroki gave a nod. Before she spoke, she grinned. Of course is okay. Izuku offered to carry the bag for her after she paid for her shirt. She agreed. Katsuki, meanwhile, was moaning inwardly. Deku was a real gentleman, and she knew it. He had learned good manners from his mother-in-law. Furthermore, the woman who had done everything for him was the reason he felt like a hero in his heart. However, at the moment, that was being counteractive. She wanted to be by herself with him. They were now accompanying Yukiko Todoroki. Moreover, he was transporting her luggage. For being so kind, curse him. She was unable to curse Deku, though, on the other hand, she could definitely blow Todoroki's face off. Katsuki was doing better than Yukiko Todoroki. Just to get even with Katsuki, she had invited Izuku. To annoy her a little before leaving, she didn't think Izuku would agree to go get ice cream. She also didn't think he would bring Katsuki along. In the first place, why did he accept? Why agree to the concept? They were still learning a lot about one another. Yes, she was curious and wanted to learn more about him. He was gentle, and his eyes were filled with warmth rather than fear or anything else. She desired to become his friend. She could only hope that everything would work out. For her, that was too much to ask. Katsuki asked for a large order that was intended for couples as soon as they entered a tiny ice cream shop. She wasn't in the mood to place an order when it arrived. All she wanted to do was ask Izuku some questions. A bunch of ice cream was in the center of the table where they were all seated now. She had also extended an invitation to Izuku. Katsuki ordered a giant ice cream, and she was going to pay for it. She could always insist that they cover the cost themselves, but she was going to keep her promise. After all, she had invited Izuku. Todoroki? You aren't having some? The fact that the voice stating that wasn't Izuku's soft voice startled her. There was no malice in Katsuki's voice. Just plain curiosity. She took a look at the offered spoon. She was unable to understand. I mean, this is a bunch of ice cream, is not meant for couples at all, so I thought it was a good idea to order this. Between the three of us we kinda eat it and pay it apart so as not too expensive. Todoroki was unable to comprehend. Izuku did. Katsuki was by no means a person who took advantage of others. She was clearly still upset that Todoroki had gotten with them today, but she wasn't going to act rudely because of it. She also enjoyed the thought of getting things for less money. Kachan and I won't be able to eat the whole thing. I mean, unless you don't want to? With a wave that refuted the assertion, she took the spoon and gave a brief thank you. They ate together in friendly silence. Yukiko Todoroki might have had a rough start to the day. However, she had to acknowledge that it felt good to share something with a boy who treated her like a regular person. She also had to acknowledge that she was genuinely enjoying Katsuki's company. She had very few friends. Don't do that, she really didn't have any friends. Among her closest friends were Katsuki and Izuku. Was that depressing? A little. She didn't care, though. She was content. At the same time, Izuku was whispering to Katsuki. Kachana. Are you seeing it? The girl nodded. Yeah, hard to believe she can smile, Deku. Izuku sighed in response to the remark. He did, however, nod. Both were observing Todoroki's constant changes in expression. She appeared happier and less serious and gloomy. Her face was adorned with a gentle smile. She looks really pretty when she smiles so like you, Kachan. Katsuki and Todoroki both stopped eating at this point. That was not what Izuku had whispered. It goes without saying that Izuku and Akatsuki apologized profusely on the way to the station, claiming she didn't want to hear it. Izuku took a brief detour to a drink machine as he sighed. He would buy her a present. He was on his detour at the time. Todoroki used the opportunity to talk to Katsuki. Katsuki, I said something rude to you last time, I apologize. The other's bow caught the explosive girl off guard, and she waved her away. Don't worry, I could care less about that, just don't speak about Deku and me like that. I am serious with him. She grinned, pleased to acknowledge her admiration for Izuku, her best friend. Todoroki gave a nod. She also extended a helping hand to Katsuki. I want to make this clear with you, I am interested in him, and since you two are not dating, I plan to give it a try myself. I will not only be the #1 hero, I am also making Izuku fall for me. Katsuki became enraged at this. However, she was also grinning. She detested those who betrayed others and concealed their true motivations. She therefore admired people who didn't hesitate to express their true intentions. She firmly grasped Yukiko's hand. I accept your challenge, I will be the #1 hero, and if you think you can make Izuku fall for you, I dare you to try. She grinned. She wouldn't allow Deku to escape. Additionally, if Yukiko believed she could defeat her, she welcomed it. Try your best, Yukiko. Fixing a strand of her long hair behind her ear, the girl nodded and grinned. You too, Katsuki. Izuku had come with drinks for everyone at the conclusion of this scene involving the friendship of two girls who had just challenged one another. It's good to see you two acting like friends. He gave them a smile. The way Yukiko kissed his cheek before rushing to a train caught him off guard. Take care, Deku. As she boarded her train, she let out a scream. There were two responses. Izuku just made a perplexed noise when his cheek was kissed. Katsuki, meanwhile, was yelling at her as she ran as quickly as she could to Yukiko's train. Yukiko. The girl on the train was certain of one thing. She felt a lot better than she had at the start of the day. Animals are often said to possess a sixth sense of natural disasters, as other creatures appear to be able to sense danger. How other people may experience illness or impending changes. Animals have an innate ability to do this, too, thanks to nature. Izuku Midoriya was born with the natural ability to sense when Katsuki Bakugo was at her most vulnerable. He had attempted to sidestep the problem, but he was aware that there was no escape. In addition, his mother had deceived him by embracing him while crying with joy. My Izuku is growing, his mother's pleasant voice said. She was embracing him with joy, unintentionally protecting him from Katsuki's rage. That's not the point. A girl just kissed your son in the cheek. A girl whom you have not approved of. Her hands were tightly clasped together by Katsuki. She forced herself to avoid hitting or blowing anything up. Izuku compared this to a crocodile that would not open its jaw. If its jaw was close, he couldn't maul anyone. However, nature commanded him to open it. And he was aware that Katsuki would need to vent after this. His mother was constantly raving about how he was developing. He spoke after concluding that he would have to confront the ox by the horns. We are free tomorrow, Stilla, why don't we have a spar tomorrow at the beach? The target was affected by the words as intended. Katsuki's hands briefly escaped their hold before closing once more, this time in a prayerful gesture. You mean it? We haven't sparred in a while. She had a gleeful smile, and he couldn't help but nod at her. They needed a piece of cake to celebrate, the explosive girl yelled in triumph. Katsuki and Izuku sparred, primarily to keep practicing. However, since they both have peculiarities, this would be their first fight. Every time she sparred with him, she used her. However, he was more trained to avoid danger and take advantage of vulnerabilities. As a result, both of them would find this spar intriguing. They met on the beach where All Might had assisted Izuku in his training on the 4th day of their free week. They concluded that the location would be suitable for sparring. Furthermore, Kachan argued that going to their typical location wouldn't be a smart idea, primarily because she believed that this season's tall grass would make it dangerous. The firefighters didn't need to chastise them again. Thus, they met and exchanged glances. Katsuki looked ready, her short hair out of her face. Izuku was observing her while stretching in his gym attire. Her smile was wild as usual. Well, you know the rules, Deku. First to fall down 3 times loses. No poking the eyes, no kick to the groin, and the winner gets a kiss from the loser. Izuku was caught off guard by the last part. Yeah, I don't remember that being part of our usual rules, Kachana. She gave him a smile. If Izuku didn't admit that he thought her smile was adorable, he would be lying. I know, but you got a quirk now, so I had to change the rules. He failed to mention that quirks had nothing to do with the new rule, so he just gave her a nod and prepared himself. It was an easy spar. 3 times, make the other fall. Izuku used to do this by causing her to lose her balance or by grabbing her arm when she made an explosion motion. 117 to 116 was their current score, but who was keeping score? Actually, both of them. They would begin counting together as usual. 3, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1. Die. Go. Izuku ran and slid to Katsuki's right as they hurried towards the other. She anticipated that in the meantime, so she pushed herself to the right with an explosion. She positioned herself ahead in the explosion's momentum. Izuku was successfully caught, spun around, and forced to fall in the sand. First blood goes to me. Izuku couldn't help but laugh. That it does, Kachan. He got to his feet and rushed forward, surprising her by taking her legs for a takedown and causing her to fall to the sand. But you forgot that the spar is still going. After giving her a smile, he moved aside to allow her to stand. She grinned broadly. Oh Deku, so mighty. Time to fall again. With a blast behind her, she hurried forward to capture him. Knowing this move, Izuku just leapt to his left as he approached her. Being aware that she wouldn't move fast enough, Izuku was aware of Kachan's specific issue. She moved like a vector. She was excellent at moving in straight lines, but her quirk made it difficult for her to move in circles. It was difficult for her to maneuver with her explosions. She was improving, but that was something he could use for the time being. In order to return to Izuku, Katsuki had to set off an explosion in front of her, but he was prepared, and just as she was about to do so, she felt Izuku's hands pulling her toward the ground. Izuku saw that Katsuki was in the air for a brief time without any energy or explosive momentum, allowing her to be guided to the ground. Second fall, Kachan, I might just get the tie. He disregarded his own counsel and failed to maintain his focus on the spar in his own happiness. He was therefore unprepared when Kachan stood up and pulled him, and he fell straight into his butt. Well, I dare say someone got cocky. They both stood up and grinned at each other. They had their eyes on each other. Izuku made the decision to give it a shot. He made an effort to visualize one for all, the energy coursing through his body. Neither he nor Katsuki anticipated the outcome. They could see how All Might was able to move so fast from one location to another. His ability to jump and run long distances was enhanced by strengthening his legs. However, Izuku's unsteady footing on the beach caused him to crash into Katsuki, who was trying her hardest to keep him steady as he went forward toward the ground. After the momentum slowed down, both of them were in the earth, giggling at the sand mess they made. Then Katsuki spoke through the laughter. Well, I guess this is your win. I fell first. Deku waved her away with a smile. Not at all, you stopped me from going farther, you won. She grinned and gave him a hug. He gave her a hug. That's how their sparring sessions would typically proceed. A protracted string of draws and awards for the other team. The nicest sparring available. It had been a long time of sparring. Between a boy without a quirk and a girl with one. It had not yet lost its good nature, despite the fact that the two now had peculiarities. Izuku and Katsuki were having a straightforward day. They decided they needed to take a bath after their fight. Inko Midoriya politely reminded Katsuki that only married couples and children were permitted to take a bath together. She also didn't meet that requirement. After Izuku, Katsuki reluctantly agreed to take a bath. The act of kindness raised suspicions in Inko's mind. It was decided that she would stand watch at the door while Izuku took a bath. She was talking to Katsuki, who was standing by the door. So still no? Inko nodded and grinned. No indeed. As I said before, either you get married and live alone, or no bathing together. She let out a sigh. We were allowed to take baths together before. At that remark, Inko laughed. Many others might misunderstand it. You were both children, and it wasn't like you always did it. Katsuki was aware that she would not move. Okay, you win, mother-in-law. In fact, Inko became concerned when Katsuki remained silent. She could handle a sad, desperate, or even angry Katsuki. I was also happy when it occurred. However, she wasn't accustomed to such a quiet one. Katsuki, are you all right? She nodded and sighed. Yukiko said she is going to try to get Izuku to like Hera. I am just thinking. Maybe if I took a part-time job, and started saving I could have enough money for an engagement banda. Inko Midoriya started to sigh. There was nothing serious about it. Katsuki just being herself. Did you say Yukiko is interested in Izuku? Katsuki nodded in response, her thoughtful expression remaining intact. Inko simply was taken aback. You are taking it rather well. Katsuki glanced at Inko at this point and then grinned. I don't need to worry, Izuku loves me, and I love him. We have been best friends since ever. Why should I worry about a girl that just appeared? Sure, she has long hair, and looks pretty. But, come on mother-in-law, there is no way I am losing. In times like these, Inko recalled how adorable Katsuki could be. She was sometimes perceived as being blunt because she was too honest for her own good. The problem is that she was that way, straightforward and truthful. She was undoubtedly Izuku's best friend. In the end, Yukiko Todoroki had to assist her sister. She was mostly using it to hold the yarn she was working with. It had been simple thus far. She had mostly listened to her sister's words while conversing with her. She would typically pose a question, and her sister would then divulge all of the information she knew. So yeah, that's pretty much all I know about hairstyling. Yukiko noticed that she was nodding. The hour-long conversation had been fascinating. Most of the time, she listens, nods, and keeps any trivia information to herself, believing it could be helpful in the future. So, enough about May. I heard Dad has been meaning to find you a date again. A flinch came over her. She didn't want to admit that it had an impact on her, however, it did. Luca, I been chatting with Hima. He actually asked my opinion. I saw the names of your partners for you. She was unable to remain silent this time. Arranged marriage. You can say it the way it is. He is arranging a marriage so I can be more popular. Heroes battled for fame. Others didn't. In actuality, though, they had no qualms about using any strategy to become the more well-liked hero. Her father thought she would benefit greatly from marriage, to portray herself as a strong woman who found time for love. He had no idea what love was. Her mom, she had no desire to go there. Yes. I couldn't convince him of stopping the whole thing, but I did manage to make all the other options go away. So you will only need to know one candidate. Yukiko was relieved by this. One applicant. She had the option to freeze him or reject him. Additionally, that would require her dad to spend more time searching for candidates. Did you saw his name? Her sister gave a nod. Yeah. In fact, he goes to UA. He was the #1 candidate on the entrance exam. His name is Izuku Midoriya. She let go of both aspects of her quirk in her hands due to the abruptness of the surprise and the shock itself. In effect, half of the yarn was frozen while the other half caught fire. Yukiko. It's a common belief that animals can sense danger. While taking a bath, Katsuki Bakugo experienced this sensation. Noah. I don't know why, but I am greatly angered with Yukiko. The girl in question dried off after taking a bath. She got dressed. The girl's frequent visits were known to Inko Midoriya. She therefore believed that allowing the girl to have a room in the house for her clothing would be acceptable. With this issue resolved, she was able to get rid of Katsuki's intention to use Izuku clothing, claiming she needed clothes, so it turned out to be a wise investment. The problem is that Katsuki's hair remained damp, but this was due to an old custom. She took a seat facing Izuku. Dry my hair. As Izuku took the little towel she had brought, she exclaimed this with excitement. The boy just chuckled and followed instructions. Like sparring, it had become a ritual between them. He would assist her with hair drying. And when the time came, she would assist him as well. Little customs. They always did the same little things. Living friends were essentially joined at the hips. However, Katsuki felt that this was insufficient. Izuku observed that his friend was silent. Kachan? Are you okay? His voice was worried as he asked. After giving him a quick glance, Katsuki embraced him. He had no idea what was happening. However, he assumed it would be best to just accept the hug and ignore his own blush. I am okay, Deku, I am okay. The following day was spent running, wearing a hoodie, and preparing for Izuku. Since building stamina was crucial, he made the decision to go for a run in the morning. To be honest, he had been hoping to spend the day with Kachan. She did, however, mention that she would be training independently. Whatever was happening, he had a feeling it was personal. He chose to respect her space as a result. He saw something he had never seen before as he continued to run down his typical road. Ice sculptures. He saw the ability in them despite their different sizes and forms. It appeared that Todoroki was training her quirk. He thought it was an excellent opportunity to find out more about his classmate's peculiarity. She saw that Todoroki had her long hair pulled back in a ponytail as he walked closer, as if to block out any distractions from her face. Hey, Todoroki. He thought it would be better to come up to her and make his presence known, so he waved. Approaching someone who was using a quirk without disclosing it was never a good idea. Mishaps may occur. Izuku waved back as the girl glanced at her. Izuku also noticed the girl's condition. She appeared to be suffering from frostbite. He walked toward her anxiously. Todoroki. Are you okay? The girl sat on the floor after nodding. Before responding, she took a breath. Yeah, just a training a controller. Izuku took off the hoodie he was wearing to cover her shivering body, and the girl mumbled a small thank you. Izuku was thinking at this point. Todoroki, your quirk freezes you if you used your left side, shouldn't it start warming you up? The mention of her left side made the girl instantly tense, and spoke in what Izuku believed to be rage. I refuse to use his quirka. Izuku noticed the girl trembling. He was unable to decipher her meaning. I don't know much about you honestly, but I am willing to listen. He took a seat beside her on the floor. He is not at all bothered by the dirt surrounding him. He noticed that she was using the hoodie to hug herself and appeared to be breathing. She's trying to get warm. After a lengthy silence, Izuku sighed before continuing. My quirka is the result of the marriage of my Mothera and Endeavor. Izuku noticed that she didn't identify Endeavor as her father. Instead, she mentioned someone else they didn't like. Yua. Heard of quirk marriages? Izuku gave a quiet nod. Everyone knew that he was aware of them. Quirk marriages first appeared in the second or third generation of quirk users. Depending on which source you choose to believe, it actually changed. However, the outcome was the same. They were unions of individuals seeking to acquire a new peculiarity, wishing that their children would combine both of their quirks. People began searching for candidates. Those with strong eccentricities sought those with more adaptable ones. It was a difficult period as others sought out more potent eccentricities, particularly for the offspring of such unions. Like when they didn't have the peculiarity their parents anticipated. It wasn't pretty, though. Endeavora married my mother because of her quirk. She made Icy a Soa. The remainder went to Izuku. The ideal fusion of these peculiarities. It produced ice, but apparently had the drawback of freezing the body. Furthermore, a fire quirk that heated the body, if his own notes of Endeavor were correct, forcing him to concentrate and refrain from making ostentatious gestures. One of these quirks causes the body to heat up, and another causes it to freeze. Thus, Todoroki's possession of both served as a sort of cooling mechanism. She could use her flame quirk to regain her body temperature after freezing it. She only needed to lower it with her ice quirk if she began using flames all the time. A peculiar union that had achieved the best outcome possible. I promised to never use his quirka. Izuku noticed that she appeared to have touched the burn mark on her face. I don't know about your situation. I can't say I understand Ida, but I believe you are lucky of having both of your parents. Yukiko was caught off guard by this, who turned her attention to Izuku. My mom has always taken care of me, and she is the best. He spoke with joy, glee that, after a few seconds, became sour. Buddha, she has always been forced to do her best. I don't know anything about my dad. Mom speaks about him. Nevertheless, I have never seen him. I haven't seen a photo of the three of USA. Izuku let out a sigh. My mom married my dad because she said they were in love, but was my dad love so fickle he abandoned us just like that? He gazed at the ice sculptures surrounding them, artwork created by Yukiko. I didn't even have his quirka. I can't say I have something of my dada. You have the best of your mom and of your dada. He looked at her after grinning, recalling the same words he had previously heard. A little Izuku felt depressed, and a girl who didn't like seeing him sad created a loud explosion in front of his face to match his sadness. So, what if your dad is not with you, Deku? You already have the best of your mom and of your dad. Don't go taking on the worst of them. You already have the best of them. Do not take on the worst of Tama. Maybe you are the result of a quirk marriage. But you are your own person. You are not Endeavor. You are not your mother. You are Yukiko Todoroki. The girl's eyes were wide open. She took in what she had just heard. Endeavor was not her. Her mother wasn't her. She had her own identity. She is unique. With her own peculiarity. Endeavor wasn't it. Nor was it her mother's peculiarity. It belonged to her. She got to her feet, giving it to Izuku after taking off the hoodie. When the girl abruptly breathed and began creating an ice sculpture, the boy's eyes appeared steely, and he was staring at her in surprise. This one lacks the other one's details. It was noisy. It was unsightly. Endeavor's ice sculpture was poorly done. She glanced at Izuku after examining it. Please, come behind me, this could accidentally hurt you. Without questioning her, Izuku got up and positioned himself behind Yukiko, carrying the hoodie. Izuku saw the girl's left arm come to life as she breathed. Then, as her hair also seemed to catch fire, it followed. Just half. Half of her hair was red. Izuku noticed that she appeared to have lost the symptoms of frostbite. And then, suddenly, a tiny burst of fire shot out of her hand, shattering the Endeavor figure. Yes. Take that, she yelled with delight. In delight at the figure's devastation. She was so delighted to remember that she wasn't alone that she felt ashamed. She gave Izuku an embarrassed look. When she saw the wonder in his eyes, her embarrassment turned to a flush. That was amazing. You can actually get your temperature back in place. There is no more frostbite in. Yukiko was taken aback. He droned on about her peculiarity. There was no contempt. No, nothing. Just wonder and enjoyment. She discovered that she was doing something that she may not have remembered doing as a child. She burst out laughing. A quiet chuckle that grew into a cackle. She was laughing in a way she couldn't really recall. However, she was unable to stop and continued until her eyes began to well up with tears due to the joy she was experiencing. Izuku halted his digression. He was also unable to comprehend the humor. He was pleased to see Yukiko so at ease. Both students eventually made the decision to separate. Yukiko needed to return home. Izuku was still hoping to see Kachan. At the mention of his friend, Yukiko appeared to frown a little. Nevertheless, they said they would see each other again at school before parting ways. It also contains a second promise. She would do more with her flame quirk. It would be useful to her. She would, however, rehearse in secret, away from her father's gaze. She enjoyed smashing the sculpture. To practice, she would make more of them. Izuku, meanwhile, was knocking on the door of a house he was familiar with. The woman at the door greeted him with a smile. Ah, Izuku. Looking for Kachan? She gestured to her room as he nodded. Her sly grin went unnoticed by Izuku. She is right there, you know the path. Without knocking, he thanked her and went to the room. He was aware of the standard. Knock if the door was closed. Don't knock if it was slightly open. He was taken aback to see his friend fumbling with her hair and a brush. Stay down, damn it. The girl spoke without glancing in the direction when she saw the door opening. Not now, old hag. I can do this alone. She looked at Izuku's cough. She had the eyes of a deer caught in a car's lights. Deku. Kachana. They were both at a halt. Prior to Izuku just walking forward and stopping the door, she hurried forward in an attempt to close it. You saw nothing, you hear me. You saw nothing, Deku. He laughed as he walked into the room. He noticed Kachan's typical belongings lying around: magazines, video games, and educational resources. The typical items that were scattered throughout her room weren't particularly neat, but they weren't messy either. He was taken aback to find the brushes and styling supplies strewn about. That was stuff he knew she never used whatsoever. He knew her room, mostly. I was trying something new. Dejected at being discovered, she said. Izuku, though, knew how to encourage her. Want to play something? We got time, plus, I would like to spend the day with you, Kachan. Any feelings of embarrassment or shame were thrown out the window as the girl grinned wildly. Oh, someone is feeling brave? Believe you can actually win this time? He nodded and smiled back at her. I know I can win. Before pulling out the controllers, she let out a loud laugh. A game is starting up. Perhaps he was unaware of Kachan's situation. Perhaps he didn't truly comprehend Yukiko's suffering. He was determined to try regardless. To continue improving. Additionally, to continue being a better friend to them. Being the kind of friend who made you smile with him. Izuku was always envious of animals' sense of danger and ability to avoid situations where their lives were in danger when he watched documentaries about them. He was envious of their ability to simply know what they could fight and what was best to avoid. People had to rely on their common sense, which was ineffective in the majority of situations. His common sense, for instance, told him that it would be wise to spend their final day of relaxation with Katsuki at the park. However, since the park wasn't far from where he saw Yukiko train, he was also aware that she might be there. However, he would be making an excessive effort to prevent Katsuki from fighting Yukiko if he revealed to her that he had spent time with her before visiting her house. However, if he didn't say it, they would both want to fight again when they saw Yukiko. Whatever the situation, a storm was approaching. Additionally, his coconut friend had already left the ship to try his luck in the ocean, and he was just a poor sailor in a raft. Yes, he was having problems. Katsuki was content. It was a lovely day, and Izuku was walking hand in hand with her to the park where they used to hang out. Only the three of them are visible in the park. 3. Oh no. She refused. Katsuki realized it wasn't a mirage when she heard the girl say Izuku in her name. But a solid human with long, two-colored hair, wearing jeans and a metal band t-shirt. Todoroki Yukiko was sitting on a bench reading a book and waving at them. If Yukiko hadn't been her rival for Izuku's affection, Katsuki would have loved that she and Yukiko shared a love for the same metal band. Speaking of which, she had a firm grip on his hand. Izuku simply sighed because he had anticipated this potential situation. He waved to Yukiko with his free hand, and she grinned. She gave the bench next to her a pat. Katsuki wanted to be upset, but she reminded herself that she had vowed not to be led astray. "You can sit here, Katsuki, you are welcome to Izuku." She followed instructions and sat down. The two of them were sitting next to Yukiko, who appeared incredibly content for once. In fact, it was able to pique the pair's interest. Yukiko nodded with a slight smile on her face and asked, "You look happy, did something happen?" Any day that Yukiko didn't have to see Endeavor was a good day. "I am just happy of having a free day without my dad." Katsuki and Izuku both nodded. As she glanced at a little sandbox in the park, she noticed something moving in the distance, like they were being watched. Her eyes were far away as she asked with genuine curiosity, "Oi, Yukiko, how long you been in the park?" Slowly, Yukiko closed her book while continuing to gaze at the same location. Izuku heard them say, "An hour at Masta," and she wasn't there for Soraya, and turned his attention to the area they were examining. A blonde girl dressed as a sailor was observing them. She was clearly staring at them, even though her head was just barely visible through the tree behind the sandbox. The group's attention was genuinely drawn to the girl's knife and bloody hands. Izuku hurried over to the girl, but Yukiko and Katsuki thought she was dangerous. When he got to the girl, neither Katsuki nor Yukiko could tell him to stop. Izuku could move very quickly when he was anxious. He swiftly grabbed the girl's hands. The girl didn't have time to react when the boy grabbed her hands or when he pulled her toward a water faucet to wash her hands. "Are you okay? Did you cut yourself? What happened?" she asked. Katsuki could only sigh and curse under his breath at the fact that Izuku felt compelled to assist everyone, while Yukiko was perplexed. The girl grinned and looked curiously at Izuku as he washed her hands. Did he fail to notice the knife in her hand? Did he not notice that her clothing was stained with blood? The boy produced a handkerchief from his pants pocket in response to her query. The girl took the handkerchief slowly and said, It might not really work, but you can try to clean your clothes with this." She used the handkerchief to wipe her clothes after dropping the knife to the ground. It was helpful, but it didn't really remove everything. She then discovered that she was stealing the handkerchief. She smiled and said, "Mind if I clean it and then give it to you?" Izuku noticed that she appeared to be blushing constantly. Her face was attractive. As the girl extended her hand to him, he grinned and said, "Sure." Izuku took her hand and grinned, saying, "Himiko Toga. Izuku Midoriya." She gave a nod before leaving. She stopped talking because she didn't want to give the boy the wrong idea. She simply waved and walked away. Izuku noticed a furious Katsuki restrained by a block of ice as he peered over his shoulder. As Yukiko spoke, Katsuki moaned, "Why are you trapped in ice?" Katsuki moaned and turned to face Yukiko. "She told me to make sure she didn't do anything stupid. This is the best I could think of." "You enjoy this, don't you?" Yukiko nodded and grinned. As they continued to argue, Izuku grinned at the two girls' growing camaraderie, saying, "It would be a lie if I said I don't find your situation funny." He was as unaware of them as he was of the power within him. School resumed, and Izuku chose to focus on the other theme that was circulating. The school at the festival was coming up, and they would need to train and perform at their highest level to demonstrate that they had what it took to be the besta rather than the whole thing about the villains. Katsuki was obviously prepared. Or she thought she was prepared. Izuku, meanwhile, still needed to figure out how to turn his leg strength bursts into speed because he had not yet mastered All Might's movement. Additionally, Yukiko was spending more time with them both. Izuku noticed that she frequently walked beside Katsuki and him. Katsuki was learning to get along with her, even though this seemed to annoy her a little. They were all three adjusting, of course. On the one hand, it was clear that Yukiko wanted to spend more time with Izuku. However, Katsuki now had to deal with a girl who was romantically interested in Izuku. Additionally, Izuku was attempting to learn how to weather the storm that resulted from the two girls vying for the top spot in the class and school. Izuku didn't understand that both girls were fighting all the time because they wanted his affection. Aizawa had made the decision that they needed to try something different. The class looked at Aizawa, who talked about it casually as though it were difficult, and said, "Today you will be working together with a classmate in a simple exercise. Knowing each other." He gestured to Kaminari and Izuku and said, "Some of you know nothing about each other and others are exactly the opposite. Katsuki nodded proudly as he said, "You two don't know much about each other, and in the opposite sense, I believe Midoriya knows everything there is to know about Bakugo. You don't know when you might work together, so take this time as a chance to learn to meet each other. That goes especially for you two." He was referring to Katsuki and Yukiko. Closing his sleeping bag, he collapsed on the floor, saying, "You two better learn of each other in this hour. Or I will just fail you too." Izuku decided to go with Kaminari because he enjoyed the idea of getting to know his classmate and thought it would be fun to try. Everyone soon had a partner, and Yukiko and Katsuki realized they were the forced couple. Using their desks to create a kind of table, they sat in front of one another. The first person to break the figurative ice was Katsuki. She sucked at the question, "So a name?" In actuality, both were terrible at it. "Yukiko Todoroki. Yours?" She grinned as she said, "Katsuki Bakugo. Deku calls me Kachan." Knowing that the nickname was the product of a close friendship, Yukiko scowled a little. Nevertheless, she calmed down and inquired. "Quirk?" laughed Katsuki. Katsuki had quickly grown weary of the pointless questions. "I make explosions. And you make fire and ice. Can we stop this? We really need to try here." Fortunately for her, Yukiko was as well. "Okay, what do you want to know?" Her question was direct and to the point. "Why do you like Deku?" Yukiko became defensive and asked again, "Why do you?" Fortunately for her, Katsuki wasn't scared to express her feelings for Deku. The ease with which Katsuki expressed her feelings surprised Yukiko. "I love him because all he is. He is honest, caring, he has known me my whole life and doesn't want to change one thing of me. He has stayed with me through everything, never asking for anything. Why shouldn't I love him?" So stop going around the question and answer. She felt envious. Yukiko wasn't sure if she should say this so publicly. "I just know he is nice. He doesn't look at me as if I were a monster. He just looks at me and sees a person. Nothing different. In his eyes, I am special at the same time I am Noda." However, she was compelled to do so after witnessing Katsuki's candid speech. Since it was clear that Yukiko was having difficulty responding, Katsuki allowed her to pose the following query. Katsuki grinned and briefly glanced at the roof before asking, "What is your goal? And I mean really, what you hope for your future? Gazing up at something much higher?" "I want to be the #1 hero, be like All Might, and I want to have Izuku by my side all the time. The two of us being the ultimate team. The #1 and the #2 heroes, always changing spots because we will never stop getting over each other, always aiming higher." Yukiko's face showed surprise. Speaking of her objectives as though they were the simplest thing in the world, Katsuki Bakugo showed no fear. As though her dreams were unstoppable. She didn't appear to be worried or consider risks. Not while Izuku was a part of her aspirations and objectives. "What about you, Yukiko? You want the top of the mountain for yourself. Because let me tell you, if you reach the top alone, better get ready to be Alwana. I doubt anyone wants to stay alone. Even you cold hands, I doubt you want to be lonely." Yukiko realized she was staring at her own hands. She was genuinely considering what Katsuki had just said. "I don't know, I just want to show him I will reach the top by my own means." Katsuki laughed. Yukiko glared at Katsuki and said, "So is not even for yourself? Is because you want to prove something?" In actuality, though, she wasn't upset with Katsuki. It went against what she had said. She was correct. She also detested Katsuki's correctness. She ventured to ask, "What should I do?" Katsuki surprised her by grinning at her. It was a smile of kindness. It wasn't one of arrogant triumph or superiority. No, it was merely a pleasant smile. The smile of someone eager to assist. She wasn't lying when she said, "Try to live for yourself, Yukiko. Do things you want to do. That's what I do." All of her actions were motivated by her desire to do so. She was the one who loved Izuku. It was her desire to rise to the top with Izuku. Katsuki Bakugo did everything because she felt like it. The candid advice surprised Yukiko Todoroki, and had no choice but to doubt it. As she looked at Katsuki, she heard her laugh and asked, "Why? Why do you want to help me?" "Why? Because you are my rival too, aren't you? Is not going to be a fair competition if you are not doing your best. I mean, I know Izuku will choose me. But in the end, you declared your intentions, and I am answering with fairness." In reality, Katsuki was concerned about Yukiko. She didn't have the girl's things, nevertheless, she didn't think that would help her. She had developed alongside Izuku. Since they were friends, they could definitely start dating. Yukiko was more focused on Katsuki's words than on that. When Yukiko Todoroki smiled, a smile came to her face, and Katsuki swore lightly at how beautiful she looked. Her words, "Thank you Katsuki," were sincere. The sincere response caused Katsuki to flush. "You are welcome." As she concluded, they heard Aizawa announce that class was over by opening his sleeping bag. "I hope everyone gained some knowledge from their classmates. I'll ask you about it tomorrow, so make sure to write it down on paper." After exchanging nods, the two girls jotted down something on paper. According to Katsuki Bakugo, Yukiko Todoroki is a nerd. Yukiko Todoroki says that Katsuki Bakugo lacks grace. A lie, one that could lead to trouble, but the problem was that they wouldn't tell their teacher how deeply they spoke, with the knowledge remaining between rivals out of respect and confidence that the other wouldn't speak. Both Katsuki Bakugo and Yukiko Todoroki had a shared interest in Izuku Midoriya, and for that reason, they would fight to the death. Each had gained the confidence of the other. There was an event coming up, though, that would test their mettle. A clash of titans would accompany the upcoming UA School Festival. Midoriya Izuku, Bakugo Katsuki, Todoroki Yukiko. While all three would be vying for the top spot, two of them would be vying for something far more significant. They would battle for someone's affection. A certain event was taking place in the Midoriya family's home, one that would have an impact on the newly developed trust that Katsuki had chosen to bestow upon Yukiko. "Greetings, ma'am." The number 2 hero, Endeavor, was waiting at the door of the Midoriya family's house. "Oh, make an effort, don't you?" As soon as Inko Midoriya saw the man with the fake fire beard, she knew one thing. He was disliked by her. Despite her dislike for Endeavor, Inko Midoriya would remain polite despite not understanding why Izuku respected him. "Sir, how may I assist you?" Enji spoke after glancing at the smaller woman. "Can I come in?" Inko grinned without nodding. She gestured to the blaze in his face and said, "Only if you turn off that beard of yours." Enji flinched in shock, wondering if the woman was serious. Inko nodded and said, "I will have to deny, lady. I suppose we'll have to talk outside after that." She wasn't lying when she said, "I'm afraid the firefighters don't like me and my constant alarms, so either you turn it off, or we stay outside." She had a bad reputation with the firefighters due to several incidents involving Katsuki. Although Katsuki had a fiery temper, she genuinely liked her and always apologized, so she never held it against her. The day wasn't going well for Enji Todoroki. He had already lost the trail of a girl with a dangerous quirk and had been denied the opportunity to talk to Yukiko about her potential spouse. Now, a woman was telling him to ruin his reputation if he wanted to talk to her in her home. Even if he wanted to, things couldn't get worse now. He sighed, allowing his quirk to give in. Inko nodded and allowed him to board. He sighed when Inko offered him a seat inside, and for the first time, Inko realized how human Endeavor was. He appeared rather worn out, and she was reminded of how she used to appear when she was caring for Izuku by herself in the early days. "May I give you some tea?" Smiling, she asked, and Enji Todoroki nodded. He covered his face with his hand, and Inko couldn't help but ask, "I would appreciate that, yes." "Has something occurred?" Enji let out a sigh and nodded. "A lot took place. But that always happens." Inko noticed something. The man in front of him had lost the beard and the heroic exterior of Endeavor, and instead resembled a weary parent who was at a loss for what to do. She had seen that expression before. When her husband left and she wasn't sure she could raise Izuku, she had seen that expression in the mirror numerous times. "You have kids, don't you?" Enji Todoroki was surprised by the question. "Do you possess telepathy?" He arched an eyebrow at her because he didn't like having his thoughts revealed. Inko Midoriya merely laughed at this. "No, I am a mother who brought up her child by herself." Enji Todoroki briefly felt strangely exposed. "I understand how difficult it is to suddenly have to care for children alone and not knowing what to do. I'm not sure how to talk to them." In a strange moment of candor, Enji revealed himself. "And I don't know how to try either. Everything I try seems to backfire. It's simple." As she offered him the cup of tea, she smiled and continued, "No one knows, and whoever says they know how to care for children is probably lying too. Parenting is challenging. We have no idea how to raise kids. We simply want to give it our all. Do you believe you have been giving it your all?" She remembered the moment she asked herself that question, and she smiled at the end of those words. Enji Todoroki let out a sigh. "No, I don't think I have," he said, sipping his tea before turning back to face Inko. Inko saw the "but" in the middle of the sentence. "Today I came to speak to you about a marriage proposal between your son and my daughter. Yet it may not be the right answer. I just want the best for my children. I thought that if Yukiko were to marry us, she would end up having an easier time later when she is a hero." Inko sighed as she considered those ideas. Do you think your daughter is so unworthy that you believe marriage is a prerequisite for success? Enji let out a sigh and denied. No, I believe I have caused that girl so much pain that she is incapable of forming healthy relationships. This caught Inko off guard. She has been asked to be the best. Always strive for improvement. There is nothing wrong with that, but I'm afraid she'll wind up alone. So that she wasn't like Maya, the eternal second under All Might, Inko concluded. Like you? The man nodded wearily. I thought that if she was married then she would be more popular for the rankings, but then I decided I just wanted her to marry someone who could make her happier. Inko grinned. He nodded and said, and you found Izuku? I talked to the educators. They said the boy was trustworthy and kind. He was particularly well regarded by All Might, so I thought he would undoubtedly assist Yukiko. Inko nodded. However, forcing your daughter to marry you is not the solution. She will only grow to despise you. And if she thought that accompanying Izuku would mean agreeing to your terms, she would end up not liking him. In order to rebel, she would be prepared to ruin her own happiness. Inko had a better understanding of the girl who had previously visited her home. Enji Todoroki nodded. He had no good argument to make with the Midoriya house matriarch. I can see that now. He got to his feet and took a photo out of his pocket. I came to warn you, too. There have been reports of this girl in the neighborhood. Call a hero right away if you see her. The image showed a blonde girl wearing a sailor uniform. Enji nodded when she said, she looks like she is the age of my Sona. Yes. However, she is suspected of assaulting and hurting a couple. I have to question her. If you see her, do call. He got to his feet and moved to the door. What will happen to the proposal of marriage? Enji Todoroki opened the door and stood inside. What kind of marriage proposal? Inko grinned as he arrived. Before starting his fire again, the man paused and said, thank you, Endeavor. Todoroki Enji. Additionally, I think I owe you, Miss Mioriya Inko. Furthermore, you owe me nothing. Try talking to your daughter, please. He nodded. Endeavor said, I will. He would go home, the fatigue around him slightly dissipating. In a strange show of trust, Yukiko Todoroki invited Katsuki to her house while her sister was also there. This would turn out to be the worst decision of her life because her sister didn't say anything when she asked who Katsuki was. She is Izuku's best friend. Her sister's expression was shocked. Izuku? The same as in the marriage contract, Izuku Midoriya? When Katsuki heard those words, she looked at Yukiko in shock. Marriage arrangement? How come I never heard of that? How come no one told me about that arrangement? Katsuki looked at Yukiko angrily before getting up and leaving the room. Yukiko turned to face her sister, who was apologizing while covering her mouth with her hands. The girl looked irate, and Yukiko knew it was a misunderstanding, so she ran to see Katsuki. Katsuki. Hold on. She waited, which surprised her. Let me explain. Yukiko winced as Katsuki turned back, her arms crossed. She could have handled Katsuki's anger, the explosive kind, but it was far more painful to see the expressionless, uninterested face. All right. I am waiting, she said in a tone that seemed so cold to Yukiko that it startled her. My father was hoping to arrange a marriage with Izuku. Katsuki nodded. Yukiko flinched once more at the acerbic tone. I could get that much from your sister. Katsuki lifted her hand and held it up to Yukiko's face. If you say that you don't love Deku, for example. Katsuki looked to the floor with apparent indifference, while Yukiko remained silent. Or that you like him to impress your father, I will blow up your face. Do you know, Yukiko? The terms of the marriage arrangement don't matter to me. You obviously knew about that for a while, and you didn't say anything about it. Katsuki looked at her and saw the sadness in her eyes. I know mother-in-law would never let it happen if it was something facade. I could care less about that. What enrages me is that I believed you were sincere when you said that we were competitors. That you genuinely trusted us enough to tell us that kind of thing. So what if you were being forced into marriage? We might have come up with something. Deku would have undoubtedly assisted as well, allowing you to marry whoever you choose on your own terms. She sighed, I would have helped. For a brief instant, Todoroki. In fact, I believed you to be one of our friends. Just for a second. Yukiko was left in shock as Katsuki left, saying, I thought you were being honest with me. I guess I was the only one being honest. Katsuki had referred to her as Todoroki, not Yukiko or Cold Hands. Without intending to, she had committed a grave error. Katsuki Bakugo walked, pulled out her phone, and dialed the speed dial number. Would you be able to visit my house? I'll explain you there. Thank you. She hung up and went home, where she was shocked to see Izuku struggling to breathe and trying to regain his breath. He had rushed there right away. She smiled at the sight of him. "Kachan, what took place? I assumed you were going to be with Yukiko." She simply walked and gave him a tight hug without responding. Not wanting anyone to see her so depressed, he gave her a hug in return and led her inside her house. She told a lie. She was lying. As he hugged her back, she only tightened her embrace. Izuku was aware of how important lies were to Kachan. She was invited to go out for ice cream with a group of girls when they were younger, but the girls were actually plotting with a group of classmates to get her to temporarily separate from him so they could harass him about being strange. When the boys saw the small group of people approaching him, Kachan decided to go tell him she would go get ice cream. After a war cry and several explosions, Kachan made sure no one else tried to bully him. One of the boys spoke up, describing how she discovered the girls hadn't actually invited her and how they hadn't been able to divert her attention. When she asked him if he could take her home, he agreed, and Kachan embraced him until she fell asleep, devastated by the thought that the girls were lying and that someone would lie to harm them. That had already happened. However, it appeared that Yukiko had unintentionally brought up the unpleasant memories. Yukiko most likely made a mistake because Kachan disliked people who lied to her, especially if they were someone she trusted. Izuku embraced Kachan more tightly and then made circles in her back. Izuku would make every effort to limit the harm. "I am sure she didn't mean Ida. You don't understand that her father intended to set you two up for marriage, and she didn't think it was necessary to let us know about that." As he held her, she buried her face in his chest. "Well, it did sound like you would talk about the arranged marriage with others." He hoped he sounded convincing as he heard Kachan rustle and break the hug slowly, her dejected face staring at him. "Surely she had her reasons. Kachana, you know, is not an easy topica," he said. "Do you recall our most recent fight?" He gave a nod. "You said I wonna." He gave another nod. He nodded slowly this time, guessing where this was going. "We agreed the winner would get a kiss of the loser." "Let me kiss you." He was caught off guard. "Kachan?" The girl's eyes were sad as she gazed at him. "Deku, I know we decided that the winner would kiss the loser, but I still want to kiss you because I want you to know how much you mean to me. That I am grateful you are Haria, that you are so important to me." This was one of those occasions that made Izuku realize that Katsuki Bakugo, also known as Kachan, was a very sensible girl who always hid behind profanity and aggressive conduct. Iida and Ochako had earned the right because she liked them, and Yukiko had taken her time. She was hurt right now and just wanted to feel better after feeling betrayed. She didn't trust people easily and had each other for a long time, so letting them in her circle of trust was a big deal. Izuku was reminded of something else by such moments. Katsuki Bakugo was a living manifestation of her emotions. She was direct and honest despite her explosive nature, and she never once denied her feelings for him. According to Kachan, her declarations of love for him were genuine and sincere. In all honesty, he struggled to respond to those emotions, and not because he didn't feel them, but rather because he wasn't certain that he deserved them. "Kachana," the girl said, staring into his honest eyes. Izuku nodded, and Katsuki grinned. "Pleasia just today." As he closed his eyes, she cupped his head gently in her hands, and when he felt Katsuki's gentle lips kiss his cheek and let go of his head, his face flushed and his eyes widened in surprise. Her eyes were no longer sad, and she was grinning with her typical smirk. "You weren't expecting a kiss on the lips, are you? Don't worry, that one is saved for when we tie the knot. I have nearly finished paying for the engagement band." As Katsuki talked about the engagement band, Izuku covered his face with his hands. Even though he was embarrassed, he was glad to see her smiling again and would lie if he claimed he didn't enjoy Katsuki's cheek kiss. Then his head was once more cupped by her hands. "Hey, Deku. Where's my kiss? You have to give me one." Izuku could only think of one thing when she smiled at him. That Kachan was content once more made him happy. Mitsuki Bakugo was looking through Katsuki Bakugo's room and was sobbing at what she saw. Those two idiots. Marry already, damn it. Despite her tears, she recorded the entire event and texted Inko Midoriya to let her know that Izuku would most likely spend the night at their house. When Katsuki Bakugo was with Izuku Midoriya, both mothers thought she was a cute girl. Inko Midoriya didn't know that Mitsuki was looking for engagement band prices, so perhaps she could help her daughter. In addition, Izuku would likely wish Katsuki would refrain from using profanity if she married her daughter. Damn it, she had the right to dream. Izuku and Katsuki went to the school together the following day, and when Ochako and Iida discovered them, they walked together. When they saw Yukiko, Katsuki stiffened up a little and walked more quickly. Izuku asked Iida and Ochako if she could accompany him on their walk because he needed to talk to someone. He waited and said hello to Yukiko. Yukiko looked down and nodded, saying, "I think you already know, but Kachan won't like to talk to you." Yukiko continued to look down, but she gasped in surprise when she felt Izuku Midoriya's embrace because she hadn't anticipated the physical contact. "I don't hold it against you or the marriage, but I would have liked to know. You two are my friends, and I don't like watching you fight. I'm sure it was all a misunderstanding, but Kachan has a story about lies that I can't share with you. Please don't hold it against her." Izuku sensed Yukiko nodding and giving him a hug in return. For the first time since the Katsuki incident, Yukiko grinned and said, "Thank you, Izuku." Izuku returned her smile. Yukiko nodded and said, "I am sure everything will go well, just give her time." Izuku felt Yukiko's hand clasp his as he broke the embrace. "Izuku, I really like you and I didn't want to speak about marriage and..." She stopped talking when she sensed Izuku's hand restraining her. "I understand. You had good reason to avoid talking about it. Kachan didn't, but I understand why. So, please don't worry. Yukiko, we are still friends." He wanted to continue walking, but she stopped him. "No, I don't want to be your frienda." This caused Izuku to turn to look behind him and see Yukiko's expression, which was solemn and full of resolve, quickly erasing the sadness that had previously been there. "The school festival will soon take place. Katsuki was challenged by me. But I'm challenging you too, I want a date." Izuku screamed the word, opening his eyes in shock. Izuku would have heard the same scream from Ochako, Iida, and Katsuki if he hadn't screamed. Ochako's curiosity had caused the group to stay hidden and listen to whatever was going on. "Yes, Izuku. Katsuki is someone you've known for years. Additionally, I've only known you for a short time. However, that does not imply that her feelings will triumph over mine. I want to take you out on a date if I win the school festival. I want you to give me the opportunity to express my sincere feelings for you." Izuku was shocked to see Yukiko, who is typically composed, acting so ferociously. "Katsuki was right, I adore you." Katsuki, who witnessed the entire scene, was upset with Yukiko, but she also felt relieved that she was sincere. "And I am willing to fight everyone to show it." Weakness wasn't good for her opponent. Katsuki was not surprised when Izuku nodded. "All right. In the school festival, I'll give it my all, but only if I win. I would like you to talk to Kachan. I want you to express your feelings to her." Yukiko nodded and grinned. Katsuki was disappointed in Yukiko for lying to her, but she could respect her for being resolute in her fight for what she wanted. The two students were grinning and shaking hands to seal the deal. Yukiko wasn't finished, though. She pulled Izuku forward in a startling move, saying, "Thina, let me have this for good luck." Izuku was shorter than Yukiko. Katsuki was taller than Katsuki, and Katsuki was taller than Izuku. Of course, it was easy to forget height when comparing one's strength to the boy who could level a building. The problem is that Izuku wasn't too heavy to pull if he wasn't prepared and didn't have the quirk. Katsuki Bakugo was so furious when Yukiko Todoroki drew Izuku close to her for a kiss on the lips that she ended up appearing content. Iida and Ochako witnessed this terrifying moment when Katsuki Bakugo's grip essentially broke the concrete of the wall they were hiding in. How dare she steal a married man? She tore into Izuku's lips. "I haven't kissed his lips yet." Iida started to say that they weren't married, but Ochako quickly interrupted him by pushing him until he floated away. She was saving his life. Katsuki would kill anyone who stood in her way right now. When Yukiko Todoroki gently kissed Izuku's lips and released him, she was in heaven. She walked with grace and dignity, so engrossed in her joy that she failed to notice that she had greeted Katsuki Bakugo as though she were someone else. The fact that the girl with the cold temper had apparently kissed Izuku Midoriya made his face flush, and he touched his lips, grateful that Kachan wasn't looking at him. He turned and glanced over his shoulder to see Yukiko walking into the school, Ochako apologizing in prayer, and Iida floating away, pleading for assistance. It goes without saying that his mind assembled the scene. "Yukiko!" She yelled as she grabbed Izuku's arm and escorted him to class, stating that they would discuss his marital status in depth later. With just a few days left before the school festival began, the stakes were high, the wagers were made, and the event was closer than ever. The wheel of fortune has begun to turn, but who will be the beneficiary? 3 would go with all their might, but only 1 would get what they desired. They would soon have to confront one another. Who would prevail? Izuku's determination to demonstrate his superiority. Katsuki's passion is fueled by the emotions that reside within her. Yukiko's resolve to establish her independence. You can only find out in one way. Izuku Midoriya, to be clear, thought the school festival was one big dumb thing. No, it wasn't. He was anxious about what seemed to be wagering on him. Obviously not. That's being petty. First of all, why would two people wager on him? Izuku sighed. Just beat it out already. The sports festival wasn't bad, to be honest. They simply created a mess first. The race ought to have been pleasant and straightforward as minefields and robots can make it. He nearly won as well after using one for all in his legs to gain a significant lead. He stumbled near the finish line, though, as the beach issue reappeared. Which he even laughed out, so it wasn't all that embarrassing. The problem is that Kachan blasted the floor behind him to propel him toward the finish line on the enormous screen that showed the events up close. It wasn't cheating to blast the floor and send him forward as the first place because it was against the rules to help others. No one would have been able to spot the blatant lie if Kachan had been able to lie the way she could express her loud emotions. Oh, so sorry Deku. My explosion pushed you forward. What a lucky thing, right? As if that weren't embarrassing enough, Yukiko slid forward in the ice to catch Kachan before he fell to the ground. This put him in third place, receiving a lot of ahs from those who witnessed the event. For that reason, he won the first event, followed by Yukiko in second and a furious Kachan in third. While watching the race from the stands next to Inko Midoriya, Mitsuki Bakugo had been whistling. Despite her kind words, Inko sensed some underlying anxiety and fear. Well, the girl is hell smooth, I mean, coming sliding in ice like some ninja princess and picking Izuku. Smooth as hell, who wouldn't feel swept with that? Inko said. The matron of the Midoriya household asked her best friend, what's the problem? And pointed to her daughter, who was restrained by both Midnight and Cementos. Furthermore, neither was doing much to hold her down. That my rabid-ass daughter is pissed. She better doesn't get disqualified. Inko couldn't help but laugh a little because, in a strange way, Katsuki's outburst of rage over Yukiko saving Izuku from falling was adorable. Despite the fact that nothing would have occurred. Inko said, to be in love is so nicey, right? Mitsuki laughed and gestured to her daughter, who was imprisoned in a concrete cage. Let me out. She is the criminal stealing a married man. Homewrecker. Katsuki's shrill cries were audible to everyone, with some people perplexed. As a scream erupted, she pondered, love is adorable, my daughter. She is as adorable as a rabid doga, really how can Izuku like her? Inko was shocked and exclaimed, I heard you old hag. Where is your damn support? The level of dexterity in her ears made her briefly imagine Katsuki as a dog. The second incident had happened in a flash. During a cavalry battle that was merely a crater after a massive explosion was contained into a dome of ice, Katsuki and Yukiko, respectively, used their quirks to say, hold me, as tight as you can, and, don't worry, we got this. Whichever team bands failed to make a clear pass to the following round. Out loud. Izuku then returned to the present and engaged Ochako in combat. Ochako only needed one touch to win the match, and he was unable to really approach. Izuku grimaced. Sometimes he was so stupid. Katsuki grinned as she watched the action from her concrete jail, as close as Cementos and Midnight would let her. Cementos, who was keeping her in the cage, became interested and said, oh, he thought of something. With a smile, Cementos inquired, what do you mean? Cementos heard two things and didn't have much time to ask, he is going to blow her away. A loud clap of the ass and the word, ouch. Izuku concentrated his strength on his body, making sure he wasn't clapping and exerting too much force on his arms. A startled Ochako is sent out of the arena by the strength's ability to release air pressure without suffering severe injuries. Izuku did, however, have red hands as a result. It turns out that giving someone a hard clap hurts. Ochako flew away with the air pressure since she had no means of securing herself to the arena. The girl was reassured by the midnight whip that she wouldn't fly far. Ochako let out a sigh. She did anticipate a fight, but not that one. She grinned, good match Deku, and Izuku grinned back. In the meantime, Cementos glanced at Katsuki. Cementos asked, how come it doesn't anger you that she speaks to him? Because she had witnessed the girl nearly run over the Todoroki girl if he and Midnight hadn't stepped in. What do you mean? Ochako is my friend, our friend. Plus, she knows all the ground rules and follows them to perfection. Cementos was perplexed by this. Ground rules? Smirked Katsuki. Cementos had not yet heard them, and he was already regretting his question. Let me enlighten you on the ground rules for girls who want to be near Deku. The student matches were almost finished. There were just 3 pupils remaining. Yukiko, Katsuki, and Izuku. Izuku versus Yukiko was the next match. Ida had been fought by Katsuki, and she would face the next match's winners in the championship match. Katsuki decided to leave Izuku alone so he could reflect rather than put any pressure on him. It goes without saying that Ochako could feel the explosive girl's grip exerting pressure on her hand. Ochako sighed, grateful for the release in her hand as she undid her quirk effects, enabling Katsuki to swiftly descend again. What if he needs my support? What if I should have said something and why am I floating? She asked. You were too worried. It's fine, you know Deku will be Finia. Katsuki groaned because Ochako was unsure of how to proceed with that statement. The explosive girl nodded but appeared tense. Kachan, Deku will be Finia I mean. You two need to fight in the finals, right? She asked. When Katsuki said, I am worried. If Deku loses, I will be facing Yukiko in the finals. Ochako was taken aback. It was unbelievable to her. I don't want to humiliate her in front of everyone. What if her mom is visiting? Or her far family? How would she live after the beating I could give her? Ochako breathed a sigh of relief and laughed. Katsuki inquired as to what was so amusing. Ochako was really overanalyzing it. Neither Katsuki Bakugo nor any opponent would ever be afraid of a fight. Her concern for her opponent's feelings after losing was, in a sense, endearing. As Izuku and Yukiko faced each other, the stadium erupted in cheers. Izuku Midoriya, the strongman of 1A, against the prodigy of ice, Yukiko Todoroki. In the stands, where Inko and Mitsuki were holding hands, the crowd roared with excitement. Most concerned was Mitsuki. She was concerned because, despite her refusal to acknowledge it, the girl's quirk was powerful as stronger than her own daughter. Come on Kita, beat that girla. In a straight fight, Katsuki was probably going to lose. Inko heard her friend say, come on Izuku. Keep my daughter safe, and tightened her hold on her hands in an attempt to show her kindness. The match soon began, and everyone was shocked that Izuku didn't initiate the action. Izuku was forced to jump, but to his surprise, the ice wasn't intended to cover him. Yukiko, on the other hand, moved forward, her hand touching the floor the entire time as she allowed a wave of ice to cover the entire arena. Just the arena. The thin layer of ice in the arena caused him to slip as he returned from the little jump he had made to avoid it. His gaze was fixed on Yukiko Todoroki, who was grinning and using her ice to create blades for her shoes. Her left side was slightly burning to maintain her body temperature while her right hand worked to create the blades. She used both sides, which surprised everyone. However, the only person who was gritting her teeth was Katsuki. Yukiko had already taken advantage of Izuku's weakness before the fight had even begun. Footwork. Izuku would be severely messed with if you could move his base, take away his footing, or do anything else that could take him off of solid ground. This was because of the nature of his power. Having too much power meant using rather strong footwork. Standing correctly to deliver a blow was always stressed in boxing. Furthermore, Katsuki was aware that Yukiko could easily build a wall behind her or use fire to propel herself forward, so the clapping trick wouldn't work with her. She could, wouldn't she? Not much of the girl fire had been visible to her. She didn't have to, though. Not when she began skating in Izuku's direction. He tried to stand, but he fumbled and had to roll away from Yukiko's right hand, which was trying to freeze him, as his eyes opened in surprise. There had never been a fight like this one before. This was not a full power explosion fight. It was such a beautiful method. Izuku was forced to back off as much as he could by Yukiko's skating, and Katsuki saw that the girl was encircling a circle with her quirk. In addition to skating to capture Izuku, Yukiko was also behaving like a shepherd dog, enclosing Izuku's space and directing him in the direction she desired. The demonstration of skill impressed the fight's casters. As his co-caster, Mike, hummed, Aizawa said, it really shows she really thought of this matchup. If Midoriya can't stand up, his strength is not going to work. Katsuki concurred, saying, wouldn't breaking the ice be good though? Except for a problem, breaking the ice would be a good solution. Yukiko would simply freeze the arena once more and use her left side to prevent frostbite from getting her from using her right side so much every time Izuku punched it to break the ice. While Izuku was battling another issue, Yukiko was displaying her quirk to the fullest. The old issue Yukiko had, ironically. Frostbite. A small amount of the ice would always stay on his skin when he was striking it to break it, and Yukiko would gradually thicken it. So little, in fact, that you would have to measure it calmly to notice it. But in combat, that was a little challenging, particularly when she kept hovering over him like a hawk. Izuku was growing desperate, Yukio was demonstrating his skill in this fight, and even though he was able to maintain his balance, he was unable to really hit her. She avoided it by skating away from each intent on actually getting hit when she got close. She had succeeded in turning the arena into her battleground, taking advantage of his vulnerability and enhancing her own advantages. This was not a spontaneous action. Yukio had been considering how to combat Izuku and Katsuki for a long time, but she had not made a decision on the battlefield. She genuinely thought about how to battle the people she respected because she wanted to win and knew they were the two biggest obstacles. Katsuki was able to move around in midair, blast her away, and generally destroy anything that stood in her way. She and Katsuki were not as strong as Izuku. However, he required appropriate footing, and she was aware that Izuku only needed to land one blow to end the battle. Thus, she would battle Izuku with grace and accuracy. Keep your distance and prolong the altercation. And the strategy was succeeding. Izuku was starting to move more slowly. She considered giving him a hug to keep him from freezing, but she changed her mind. Her father was yelling for her to use her fire more, but Yukio was too preoccupied with the battle to notice. The casters were not audible to her. All she could think about was Izuku and his movements. She was aware that he could change everything with a single move. And as she watched him lift both hands to punch the arena, she was preparing. I can't give up," Izuku said, trembling, as he prepared his powers. However, he abruptly lost consciousness, so the punch would never come. As Izuku dozed off in the arena, Midnight cried out, "Fight is over, quick! Medics!" However, Yukio had outpaced him. As Katsuki tried to remain motionless, Ochako noticed Yukio Todoroki embracing Izuku, seemingly ignoring the more pressing need to keep him warm. Ochako believed Katsuki was upset about Yukiko's victory over Izuku. However, that was untrue. It was an instance of something deeper and more intimate. Her character. She would never be able to do what Yukio was doing because of her quirk. However, she pondered about it. She had a memory. Izuku once remarked that her quirk was wonderful. Focus. You're thinking about it too much. She'll be your next opponent. The other girl looked at Katsuki's serious expression and was distracted from her thoughts about her friend by her voice, Ochako. With steely conviction, Katsuki said, "Check on Deku for me in the infirmary. I have to focus to fight her." However, there was no rage. In a sense, the better word seemed to be respect. Katsuki walked with conviction as she descended without waiting for Ochako's response. Katsuki grinned fiercely as she walked toward the waiting area. "Okay, cold hands no, Yukio. You showed everyone what you could do when you were serious. Now let me show you what happens when you mess with the one person I care the most in this world." They would give her a call soon. She would also put up a fierce battle for Yukio. Inside the infirmary, Izuku was sighing as Recovery Girl checked him for any injuries that weren't immediately apparent. The main thing that hurt him was his pride because Yukio had beaten him. It wasn't a bad fight. It wasn't a huge deal. Even less because he was inspired to use one for all in a different way after witnessing Yukio fight. However, Recovery Girl's cane gave him a tiny poke, so his smile had to end. "What's up with you grinning like that? You lost, and in such a way too." Izuku simply laughed and stretched, unsure of how to describe it. "Well, yes, I lost. But I won too." Izuku grinned, perplexed, as the doctor questioned whether he didn't have brain damage that she had overlooked. Izuku went on to explain after noticing her expression. "Yukio beat me, but it was a solid win. She fought with her strengths and used my weaknesses against me. If roles had been reversed, I would have done the same. It would have been dumb of her to just come at me and not expect me to punch back. Plus, because I lost, I got to learn a lot of weaknesses I had. I can now grow out of them." His clarification of his words made Recovery Girl laugh as well. The boy looked at her and hummed for a while. She nodded and grabbed a notebook. "Say, you have a notebook I could use?" she asked. Izuku grinned. He had a lot of things to write down before they got away from him. How to defeat someone who could avoid contact, how to defeat someone who moved more quickly, and how to combat someone who used the terrain. Izuku was full of ideas, and he smiled as he concentrated on the screen that displayed the next and last battle. Kachan and Yukio. Yukiko's primary strength was her readiness to engage in combat with strong opponents. However, how would she perform if she were to fight someone who had just been given a buff? Izuku grinned. It had been worth the blow to his ego. Just break the arena. His thoughts strayed to the notion of simply smashing everything and calling it quits on the altercation. However, a deal needed to be made. A pledge. Kachan and Yukio had to battle to resolve their differences. Tension remained between the two of them. Feeling the power in his arms, Izuku's mind wondered as he prepared to collide with the floor. They need to fight each other. But not in classes. They will just get in a mess of Buddha if they fight in the finals. No one can complain, plus it will force them to take out all of their stress. Well, this is my answer. Izuku decided to just drop after losing all of his strength and letting himself fall, forcing them to face off in the championship game. Izuku could have continued fighting because there were no wounds to treat. He wanted both girls to confront their issues head-on, though. You lost on purpose, Recovery Girl asked with a smile, surprising him by bringing the notebook. He snatched the notebook with embarrassment, and she laughed. You muttered all of what you thought. You need to learn to stop doing that. Mind keeping the secret? Kachan would never forgive me if she found out I let the match go like that so she could fight Yukiko. Recovery Girl began to giggle. Only you would drop a match for someone else. Your secret is Safia on a condition, Izuku gasped. It would seem that there would be repercussions if the fight were lost. The final fight is here. Two girls will fight for the number 1 spot. In the right, Yukiko Todoroki, the girl whose ice has shown to be a work of art, and in the left, the living explosion, Katsuki Bakugo. The entire arena erupted when they were shown. Inko and Mitsuki each gave Katsuki their own cheers. Kill that homewrecker. Mitsuki gave Inko a stern look. Stay safe, Katsuki, his words. Inko laughed uneasily. What kind of battle cry is that? While Katsuki grinned at their voices over the clamor. Before Yukiko, Katsuki appeared assured. Her smile, however, had a feral expression. The tiny explosions that her hands used to make were no longer occurring. Rather, she appeared to be concentrating solely on her fight. As soon as the cry roared, Yukiko proceeded with her plan as usual. The arena is frozen. However, when she allowed her to freeze the arena, she was taken aback to see Katsuki grinning. She was perplexed. Was she unaware of her plan? Anyway, she proceeded, using the same tactic as before. Yukiko wasn't sure what had happened, but Kachan continued to smile and look wild. She was skating toward her one moment, then blinded the next. She swore at herself. She hadn't noticed the girl's blinding explosion because she had been so preoccupied with Katsuki's expression. Is troublesome not being able to see Yukiko was unable to respond when a loud noise erupted, causing her and the entire arena to clutch their heads in agony. Yukiko felt a great deal of pain because she was at the epicenter of Katsuki's explosion, which was a harmless-sounding explosion that sounded like thunder booming. Katsuki was aware that Yukiko couldn't hear her, or perhaps she couldn't respond, so she said, "Get ready, I am going to punish you for what you did." She was indifferent. Payback time had arrived. As she launched herself into the air with explosions, Katsuki released herself from the floor and proceeded to Yukiko, where she dropped the girl in the chest, sending her flying. With the ice surrounding them, she hoped Yukiko would slip out of the arena. She was pleased when the girl was able to adhere to the arena by using ice to hold her in place because that would have been too simple. Katsuki continued to blast herself away from the ground, saying, "Good. I am angry and you deserve what you are about to get." If Yukiko had control over the earth, that was all right, but she had the sky to maneuver around, which was much larger. After her hearing returned, Yukiko turned her attention to the fly in the sky. She created a few pillars to help her fall back to the ground, but a larger explosion from the air met her intention and forced her to use ice to protect herself. "Your ice is too slow for me." Yukiko spat out at Katsuki for being in a better position. "Guess what isn't slow? This?" Katsuki used her left side to dodge a burst of fire that came to life by stepping to the side. While Yukiko was more like a tank on the ground, Katsuki was a fighting plane because of its altitude. She just didn't reach far enough. Katsuki halted her detonations, enabling her to plunge directly at Yukiko. The girl was more shocked when Katsuki smiled and spun, releasing an explosion, than when she was perplexed by the seemingly suicidal drop. The painful kind, that is. Having been caught off guard while concentrating on the attack, Yukiko took the brunt of the blast. If her intuition hadn't been off, she would have been ejected from the arena if she hadn't been able to rally support. "That's for not telling me the truth." Yukiko became enraged at Katsuki's irrational expression. As she got to her feet, Yukiko exclaimed, "What the hell you mean?" The arena had returned to its solid state due to the heat, and there were tiny pools of water all around them. Katsuki gestured directly at her. Yukiko's eyes widened in anger. "You know what I mean. You didn't tell me or Izuku what was going on. Weren't we friends?" she exclaimed. "Didn't we solve this already? I thought I had explained it before." Katsuki prepared to detonate an explosion. Yukiko was prepared, but her defense failed and she was pushed back. Katsuki roared as she took another breath. No, you spoke. But you have yet to truly apologize. I trusted you, damn it. Yukiko began to quickly form the thickest pieces of ice she could to shield herself from what she knew was coming after noticing that the girl was now gaining a lot of height with her explosions. Eat this. The explosion from the sky landed directly on the arena, frightening everyone in its path. Cementos briefly considered stopping the fight, but he restrained himself while measuring the explosion, which, despite appearances, was controlled and only targeted at the arena, and more, to the extent that Yukiko Todoroki was present. Observing that Yukiko needed to remain on the defensive, Katsuki grinned from above. The frostbite began to show and she had to keep making ice. She had this plan. Izuku grinned as Katsuki revealed what she had discovered to him. A focused blast of power, she said. That's right. It's harder to make them this way because explosions naturally go all over, but by making sure the form of my hands is right, the majority of the explosion comes out straight. She cracked a grin at Izuku. In one of those strange, embarrassed moments, she laughed and asked, "You've been working on this for a while, haven't you?" You gave me the idea. You are trying to make your power go all over, while I need to do the opposite, focus all in a single blast. That way I can stop collateral damage and focus on hurting only who I want. She laughed as Izuku laughed at her. She intended to use her ice to make Yukiko defensive. She would have to stay with her ice as long as she ensured the girl couldn't use her fire. It was clear that Yukiko had worked her ice to the point where it was her primary area of focus. Therefore, the frostbite would kick her ass if she could make her continue to defend. She suspected that this fight was caused by Izuku. When it became clear that he had complete control over his arms, he abruptly collapsed. And Katsuki got an idea from that recollection. This battle needed to end. Literally. Ah! She cried as she exploded all around Yukiko, forcing the girl to defend herself by falling to the ground and using explosions to destroy everything. Yukiko was too preoccupied with protecting herself to realize what Katsuki had done. Everyone in the public could be heard gasping in shock as the smoke cleared. With the exception of the center, Katsuki Bakugo had destroyed the arena, leaving behind what appeared to be a roughly circular shape. Yukiko's ability to move normally was now gone, and her ice ring trick was ruined. Furthermore, she had to battle Katsuki in close quarters. If the girl had taken to the skies, her superior reach would have won. Yukiko took a desperate action without hesitation. She and Katsuki stood in a small, rough circle, enclosing it in a dome of ice. The girl was staring at Yukiko while cracking her knuckles. Close and personal, how I like it. Yukiko noticed that she was smiling strangely as she stretched and approached Katsuki. Midnight and Cementos were bewildered as they emerged from the dome. Because they couldn't see inside, they couldn't really stop the fight, but they could hear sounds coming from inside, and based on what they could hear, the girls were fighting. Ah! Yukiko's scream was followed by a thump, as though someone had struck the dome's side. Bitch! Katsuki was definitely that. Her war cry was followed by a visitor inside the dome on the opposite side. Midnight had a certain belief. The girls weren't using their eccentricities inside that dome. I trusted you. You didn't let me explain. Why would I? Because we are friends. Fuck you. What's your problem? You. Midnight heard Aizawa's voice in her ear from her comm as the words continued to flow. While laughing, Midnight asked, "What's going down there?" "The girls are duking it out. I believe both aren't using their quirks. I believe is a pride thing." Aizawa sighed. She grinned and said, "Stop the fight then." She was certain Mike would agree if he heard. She could hear Mike laughing and said, "I think we can't stop their fight. Let them roughhouse each other a bit more." She grinned because she could hear less activity now, but it sounded like slaps. "Did you slap me?" Yukiko exclaimed, startled. Yukiko was fuming with rage. "You deserve more than that. Izuku and I believed you were our friend," she said. Yukiko slapped back, asking, "Why is this such a big deal to you?" Herself. This time, Katsuki screamed, "Because I don't have many friends," rather than slapping Yukiko. Yukiko was surprised. Although Katsuki's anger was still evident and her eyes were watering slightly, Yukiko surmised that this was no longer about her. You don't know how it is to not trust anyone, fearing they act behind your back." Katsuki was taken aback when Yukiko remained motionless, braced for impact, and took the punch to her cheek. "I thought, for one moment that I could trust you. And what did I get?" Katsuki exclaimed. The punch's form was sloppy, and she wasn't expecting to get her. How did it work? Yukiko gave her a shaky response. Yukiko straightened up and kicked Katsuki in the chest, sending her to the ground. You really were hurting from this, weren't you? Do you even know how it is to be seen as nothing but a tool? Something to earn status. They were both nearing the end of their tank reserves. For one time, I actually thought something good was going on. Hell, I actually thought I had found something for myself. And it turns out he already has someone. Yukiko was angry with Katsuki. So forgive me if I wanted a bit of happiness for myself. Sorry if I didn't tell you of what happened. Sorry for messing with you. But I won't say I am sorry for trying to be with Izuku. Her speech was interrupted by a punch to the stomach. As Yukiko punched her back, Katsuki retorted, "Well, you better, because that would make you the crappiest rival ever." Yukiko was about to punch Katsuki again when she collapsed to her knees. "Well, that's great. 'Cause that would make you a crappy friend," she exclaimed. She wasn't accustomed to Katsuki's degree of physicality. As Katsuki exploded the dome one last time, she exclaimed, "Well, that's great. 'Cause I hate being angry at you. I actually want you to be my friend, damn it." Yukiko got up and her figure was on the ground. Everyone in the arena was stunned as she roared at the sky. What transpired in the ice dome was unknown to them. The girl who was roaring wildly to the sky standing was the only one they knew had won. The fight is over. The winner is Katsuki Bakugo. As Yukiko lay on the ground staring up at the sky, Katsuki continued to roar. She cursed a little. She was unaware that Katsuki was more mature than she appeared to be. After this was over and she was able to stand, she would need to talk to her. The awards ceremony went smoothly and quickly, which was a nice touch. In the tournament's final round, Izuku defeated Iida to secure third place. Izuku had taken to break the entire floor, so the victory had been swift. When Midnight questioned him about why he hadn't done that with Todoroki, he replied that the freezing had left him weak. A falsehood. However, it was successful. Both of the girls in first and second place on the podium now appeared a little uncomfortable. A lot had transpired within the ice dome. Still, when Katsuki took Izuku and Yukiko by the arms, she unexpectedly took the lead with both of them. As Katsuki led Yukiko and Izuku to her podium, she earned perplexed looks from the teachers and the general public. "Get over here." The three individuals occupying the top spot. As the close contact occurred, Izuku turned red. When Yukiko screamed, her embarrassment at being in such a predicament with both of them increased. All Might hurried over to hand out their medals to each of them, saying, "Hey, when are we getting our medals?" Young Midoriya. He grinned and handed him the third-place medal. Despite her nervousness, Yukiko smiled when the top hero awarded her the second-place medal. But when All Might congratulated her, Katsuki Bakugo had the biggest smile. For her, nothing could spoil this moment. As Katsuki waited for Izuku to change into casual attire, she yelled in exasperation, "Crap! Cheap piece of wood! Why can't they?" Og. As he talked to Katsuki, he was leaving the changing room. When the podium collapsed, they had taken a picture of the three winners. Well, to be fair, there wasn't supposed to be three people on the podium for first place Kachan. Not now Deku. Now is not the moment for logic. When the podium fell, Katsuki Bakugo tasted the floor. Izuku fell, but he was able to fall with his back, so he caught her when Yukiko fell. "Are you angry Yukiko fell over me?" he asked. Even though the moment was adorable, it was also romantic, and Katsuki Bakugo would never accept that Yukiko, Todoroki and Deku were having a romantic moment, particularly since she was aware that everyone was taking photos. Izuku patted his friend's back as he emerged wearing a casual green t-shirt. Before giving him a hug, said friend grinned and became excited by the physical contact. He gave her a hug in return, knowing deep down that she was ecstatic despite what had transpired. First place. Kachan had secured the top spot. She emerged victorious from the festival. Nevertheless, a quiet voice interrupted their early celebration. "Katsuki?" Izuku asked, glancing at Yukiko Todoroki, who was wearing jeans and a casual rock band t-shirt. She appeared both at ease and anxious. A strange mix. Katsuki asked the girl, "Can we talk?" before she turned to face Izuku and gave him another tight hug. Izuku grinned and nodded, saying, "You can go ahead, Deku, I'll talk to her." Before walking beside Yukiko and giving her a thumbs up in support, he gave his friend a hug in return. The girl smiled and her cheeks flushed, but they turned pale when Katsuki was in front of her. "What do you want to talk about then?" Izuku was seated far away from the two girls, who were seated on a bench outside the stadium, with the mothers of their two childhood friends nearby. "What do you think they are chatting about? Maybe they are making amends?" Izuku sighed, hoping it wouldn't get out of hand. Both girls were sitting there, struggling to find the right words. So, you. Before Yukiko let out a sigh, both of them realized they were still attempting to speak simultaneously. The offer to blow her up in pieces was accepted by Katsuki, who would also accept it on any other day. I will go first, then you can do whatever you want, even blow me up in pieces. Fine? Fine. Yukiko looked at the girl and said, I want to apologize you for everything that I made you feel. It wasn't my intention to hurt you. Still did. Yukiko looked directly into her eyes, full of determination and unafraid. I wasn't finished. I am sorry, Katsuki Bakugo, for hurting you, because I do want to be your friend. But if you don't want to be my friend after all of what happened, I will understand, but I will keep trying and trying until you let me be your friend because you are nice. She grinned at her. She repeatedly listed things that infuriated Katsuki, including, outside of having absolutely no class at all, your hair looking like a bird's nest, your lack of patience, your extremely short fuse, and being crass with language. Hey. Not my fault. I am no nerd. Miss, I am the perfect ice princess. Peasant. Stuck up. Dumb. You are calling me dumb? I am not calling you smart. That one is Izuku. You are the dumb explosion. Oh? Sorry, I am no ballet dancer. Little miss, I am going to skate around. Izuku was listening to the conversation and began to laugh. Even though it appeared to Katsuki's mother that things were getting out of hand, he could tell they were genuinely bonding. Before Bakugo took the girl into her arms and began tampering with her hair, Yukiko briefly displayed signs of hurt. So, we are friends again? No, because you weren't my friend before. You weren't honest. Hey. You are my friend now. So get used to this. Bird's nest. You will be a bird's nest when I am done with you. Yukiko was able to pull away from Katsuki at that point and grinned at her. You mean it? Yeah, we are friends, cold hands. Yukiko. I know what I said. I am going to start calling you short fuse then. On what grounds? That I am the tallest of the two, she replied with a smug smile. You. Izuku grinned. Until he had to run to stop the two girls from grabbing each other's hair. Everything was going to be all right. Everyone's long weekend began the day following the sports festival. They would have an extra day to relax, which wasn't bad in and of itself because Izuku could use the time off. He was free, which was the issue that said rest brought in. That is, neither the days nor the long weekend's plans. Implying that there was only one meaning. That a visitor was on his way. So he went to get dressed and take a bath. Even though it was early in the morning, he sensed it. It was as evident and indisputable as gravity. Therefore, Inko Midoriya herself was setting the table for 3 people while he took a bath to unwind. The day was free. This implied that only one individual would pay them a visit in the morning. Indeed, it was early, but there's never a bad time to prepare breakfast, especially since they knew Katsuki would arrive shortly. As a result, the Midoriya household was active in their guests' minds from a fairly early age. Because Katsuki always just opened the door and entered without much difficulty, and because of the strange arrival time, Inko thought it was strange to hear a knock on the door when breakfast was almost finished. She showed up exactly on time, 15 minutes after breakfast was finished and barely 5 minutes after that. Inko chuckled to herself before heading to the door, saying, she is excited about spending the day with Izuku. Morning Ka Yukiko. She interrupted herself halfway through the name when she noticed the tall, kind-faced girl wearing jeans and a t-shirt. Her long hair was pulled back in a ponytail. There was no arguing that Yukiko Todoroki was attractive, but based on the girl's facial expressions, Inko thought she appeared strangely happier. Inko was taken aback but graciously invited the girl inside, saying, Sorry to intrude, I know it is early, but I was hoping to see Izuku. The girl shook her head and said, Don't worry, Yukiko. Izuku is taking a bath, so you can wait for him. Did you have breakfast already? I must confess I kind of rushed here. Yukiko appeared strangely fresh for someone who had hurried to her home. Oh, her peculiarity. Was she kept at a comfortable temperature by her quirk? My goodness, I'm behaving like Izuku. As she invited Yukiko to sit at the table, she mused. Yukiko thanked Izuku and sat down, saying, I will be serving breakfast when Izuku is down here. Knowing that Katsuki would arrive in less than 10 minutes, Inko made another batch of waffles. Indeed, that was the case. Katsuki gleefully opened the door as Izuku came down the stairs. Morning, mother-in-law. Morning, Izuku. Morning, Yukiko. Yukiko. Katsuki exclaimed as she finally realized her adversary was seated at the table. She came before me? Is this some sort of trick? Inko arrived at the table with food on plates and said, You? No raising the voice in the morning. With a groan, Katsuki sat down at the square table in front of Yukiko. It was a rather nice setup, with Inko sitting in front of Izuku to keep the other girls from complaining. Morning Kachan, morning Yukiko. Both girls were in the house because they greeted each other so early. Since Yukiko is new to this, Kachan was anticipated. Even though it was unexpected, it wasn't unwanted. Additionally, the Katsuki who behaved at breakfast showed Yukiko a completely different side. The eggs were delicious, the waffles were fluffy, and Inko Midoriya added a soothing touch to the whole experience. Inko said shyly that it wasn't that big, but Yukiko smiled and said, "This is delicious. Thank you." Only for Yukiko to be supported by the girl with the fiery temper. She pictured Inko with her hair covered behind a kitchen bar, and Izuku dressed similarly, holding a tray to his well-defined chest. She is right though, everything is always good. You should open a restaurant, mother-in-law. That way I can get breakfast with Izuku and you every day. Izuku spoke before she could continue to daydream or even come up with a name for the location. He turned to Yukiko and said, "So I am happy we are all having breakfast together, but I need to ask." She would have continued, but Inko's eyes reminded her that she shouldn't interrupt others while they are speaking. "Why did you come to visit so early? I know Kachan always likes to do so." "Hell yeah," she said. "Oh." Yukiko's cheeks began to warm up. He found himself grinning when he said, "Well, to be honest, I wanted to invite you out. You know, make the most of the 3-day weekend." "No way. I came out to do that." With a sigh, Inko began to remove the dishes. Izuku made the decision to follow her, but she gestured for him to remain. Before entering the kitchen, she smiled and said, "Someone ought to keep peace and avoid quirks getting used." Their arguments continued until Yukiko said something that left Katsuki and Izuku speechless. "I arrived first." "Well, I have known him longer. You hog enough time with him as it is. It's called being married. I don't see any ring. I am working on buying an engagement band, okay? They aren't cheap." Katsuki and Izuku were stunned in silence when the girl who could break them all turned to face him calmly and said, "He owes me a date." A playful grin before she burst out laughing, indicating the space between him and Yukiko. As though inquiring, "Do you hear this? Isn't it enjoyable? It's a joke, tell me." "Eh? Well, we did agree you would get a date if you won in the school festival," Izuku replied. Yukiko gave a nod. Katsuki excused herself from the pair at this point and proceeded to the sofa, looking at a few pillows before yelling at one that caught her eye, hard. She was actually behaving more like a lawyer than a hero when she said, "And I did win against you. And technically we all won because in the picture we are all in first spot. Plus, I did my part of the deal and talked with Katsuki." However, Izuku could acknowledge that she did reconcile with her. "I mean, it does make sense, in a way." He sighed. With his cheeks now feeling warm, he confessed, "But, if you want a date you could ask." Katsuki continued to scream. It was difficult for her to keep from losing her mind. "I guess I do it, but, since I feel we won't be able to have a date now. Is good Katsuki is here." "It is?" the aforementioned girl asked, halting her tirade of rage and instantly becoming interested. "Would the two of you like going to the beach?" she asked with a kind smile and a prayerful hand gesture. Both were obviously perplexed. As it happened, the Todoroki family owned a beachfront home. Yukiko wanted to go with her sister, but her sister insisted that she invite her friends. She only had 2, so it wasn't difficult. She wouldn't describe her classmates as friends, even though she was beginning to talk to them more. But when it came to friends, Izuku and Katsuki did fit the bill. After Yukiko's sister and the others had finished their introductions, they drove to the beach. Fuyumi knew without knowing the group that the girls would ride in the back and Izuku would ride in the front. Fuyumi Todoroki assured Inko that they would take care of everyone, stay for 2 nights, and then return. Inko appreciated Fuyumi's disposition. The use of the family as a tool to influence Inko to favor the Todoroki clan was what Katsuki saw as a low blow. "Oh, you. Fortunately for you, the elderly hag is not good at leaving a good impression." To be fair, Inko Midoriya's best friend was Katsuki's mother. Nevertheless, Izuku and the girls had a peaceful ride to the beach, primarily because both Izuku and Fuyumi were fanboys who talked about heroes. With a laugh, Katsuki remarked, "They are nerds," while Yukiko sighed. Katsuki glanced at Yukiko and said, "They are. But both are cute." Even so, it was strange to realize they were friends once more. "Hey, don't act so down. I also thought I would be sitting with Izuku here, but at least we are friends." They ended up hitting and slapping each other and throwing each other in a bunch of ice not even a day ago. She smiled and said, "Friendza, they were definitely on better terms." It goes without saying that the beach house was large and not excessively so, but sufficient for 4 people. However, Fuyumi had arranged 3 futons in a space. If Izuku went to the extreme rather than the middle, the girls would have already decided where to stay, but Fuyumi broke those plans. Fuyumi was a strict chaperone, crossing her arms and saying, "Izuku will be sleeping in a different room, we will be sharing a room." The girls sighed before Fuyumi grinned and clapped. "I already told him to lock the door to his room at night and I will do the same here. So, anything else?" The girls grinned when they said, "Well enough looking down, we came to the beach to have fun, right?" Yes, that was the main idea, but for Yukiko, being apart from her father was an added bonus. The girls soon left to get ready for the beach, and Izuku himself had finished getting ready rather quickly. Swimming trunks, a t-shirt, and sandals. He was therefore waiting for the girls in the living room of the house, close to the entrance. It was Fuyumi who first showed up. She wore a similar outfit to Izuku. Her shorts, however, were longer. She appeared thrilled. She had requested a day off to spend the weekend with her sister, saying, "It's nice to have some time free from work myself. I've been meaning to come to the beach for a while." Katsuki roared down the stairs before Izuku could say anything. She came down in a swimsuit that fit her well and swimming trunks, saying, "The beach better get ready for me. How do I look, Deku?" she asked, smiling in the hopes of receiving some affirmation from his friend's flushed face. However, before he could respond and Katsuki teased, Yukiko unexpectedly appeared in a wet suit. Katsuki was the first to raise the question, "A wet suit?" She anticipated that the girl would try to woo Deku away from her by wearing something, well, revealing. However, she was shocked to see that Yukiko's cheeks were a little flushed. "I get burned easily on the beach." Both remained silent, but the girl's extreme paleness made a lot of sense. It was clear that she would be covered to prevent burns if she enjoyed the beach. Because it fit her so well, Izuku still thought she looked awesome in the wet suit. When he saw Yukiko grinning and Katsuki's angry expression, Izuku Midoriya realized he was talking out loud once more. Deku. It goes without saying that the group was all set up on the beach after a few explosions came from the house. Fuyumi had prepared a towel and brought an umbrella so she could sit and unwind while observing the trio. As they headed toward the water, they had lost very little time. Katsuki exclaimed, "The last person to enter the water is a loser," as the 3 of them started to run. For 3 of them, at least, that had been the plan, but only 2 made it into the water. Ow! Yukiko. Katsuki ended up slamming into the pillar of ice that the girl had brought out right where she was going to walk. After laughing, the girl in the wet suit joined Izuku in enjoying the water. It goes without saying that their brief beach excursion was enjoyable already, and it was only getting started.
I'll continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.